This workshop of the Judson Board of Trustees is hereby called to order at 5:02 p.m. I'm very pleased you've taken time to join us this evening. I extend to each of you a sincere welcome from the entire school board. Thank you for your interest in Judson ISD. We have established a quorum. Would you please mark your attendance? Okay, here we go. Thank you so much. Our first item is to have public address, visitors and citizens to be heard. I have, I believe, 8 people, so I will call you out in the order that Ms. Holmes gave them to me. Our first citizen is Jessica Pope to discuss JSTEM. If you could please go to the microphone at the podium and make sure you're speaking into the microphone.
Okay. Thank y'all for letting me address you on JSTEM. I have a son that's in JSTEM with the hopes of my daughter making it there next year. There was just a couple of concerns that we have noticed. He is a 7th grader, going to be an 8th grader. Some of the issues we're seeing is y'all want to move this to Kitty Hawk, which I understand boundary lines change, but the main thing is I looked up transportation today at this time, which these children would be coming home for. You're looking at an additional hour drive to go from JSTEM at Kirby, from Kitty Hawk all the way to Kirby, which is our feather school in the other end of the district. You're also talking about moving it from a centralized school to a feather end school district, with the exception of the new one being built, which we still haven't even staffed or students yet. So you're looking at an additional one-way, half an hour to an hour's drive for these kids, bus drivers, gas, transportation, and all of that. Take that into consideration. You know, so the location, keeping it at Judson Middle, would keep it centrally located. Also, 2 years ago when my son was starting, he is now going to be an 8th grader going in next year, we extended a program for the waitlist kids so they could all come to Judson Middle, that we would put them together so when they got moved from the waitlist to the JSTEM program, they were still with their peers. Now, they had to provide their own transportation. If, for me, getting from my school, which is basically the Metzger area, to drive here, just driving, not transportation or a bus, took me half an hour. That would have been when our middle school kids are leaving their school. It took me a half an hour to get here. So if it took me that long, parents aren't going to drive that long, especially when we have to provide our own transportation for these kids to be waitlisted. Second of all, the administration, the staff, the support staff at that school, oh my God, I cannot say enough about them. They are amazing. They are there. They are present. They know their parents' names. They have no problem talking to their parents. Matter of fact, some of them are crazy enough to give me their personal cell phone number, which I have not abused except once. But my point is this, to move it from an established environment where the staff is trained and prepared on how to handle this to a school that has no clue what they're fixing to get into. Lack of a better word, I think is a little crazy, but y'all might know something y'all haven't shared. Second of all the resources, they just finished their PLCs. There's a lot of work that goes into that. They shut an entire grade, they shut the entire school down as far as STEM goes to do this. But they also have the resources available. Are we gonna pay somebody to make sure every closet is emptied, every closet is moved? Trust me, teachers don't even wanna clean out their rooms. As the electives go, my son has worked extremely hard, has worked tirelessly with his teachers. He has dyslexia, and it is not a pretty one. It is a very difficult one, diagnosed very late. He has worked very hard to stay on the AB honor roll so he could be a part of these electives. You know, he's in honors band. They're training him to go for this competition that they were talking about last night where they compete against all the other schools. And he's already made first string on 8th grade team. The coaches have already told him, you are one of my starters. He moves to Kitty Hawk. Kirby is where I'm from, sorry. I love it there though. Kitty Hawk, he's gonna have to start all over. He's gonna have to fight for these positions. He's gonna have to rebuild these rapports and he has anxiety. I mean, he's a goofball, but he does have anxiety dealing with
I'm
it.
going to let you finish that sentence, but your time is up, ma'am.
Okay, but that's pretty much it. It was just, and we just celebrated 10 years there, strong. Not many of our programs can say that right now. Not many.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mercedes Weekland regarding JSTEM move to Kitty Hawk.
Good evening, members of the board. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to voice my concerns regarding the proposal to move JSTEM from Judson Middle School to Kitty Hawk Middle School. While I understand this decision may come from positive intentions, I ask you to consider the profound impact this move could have on the students. Personally, as a JSTEM student, JSTEM is not just a place of learning. It is a home away from home. For many students, this school brings stability, safety, and a sense of belonging. Uprooting us from a familiar environment can disrupt the connections we've built with our peers, teachers, and community. These friendships are essential for emotional well-being, particularly in middle school when personal development is in a constant state of change. Additionally, this move would force students to adapt to entirely new elective teachers, programs, and routines. In many cases, we have worked hard to earn places in athletics, band, orchestra, mariachi, and building relationships and accomplishments over time. Moving to a new school means students may lose the positions they've earned or have to start over in unfamiliar settings, and unfair disruption to our progress and passions. Mental health is another issue to consider. Moving to a new campus can increase anxiety, particularly for students who thrive on routine and familiarity. For current 7th graders, soon to be 8th grade students, me personally, this change would be especially difficult. Instead of enjoying our final year feeling like leaders of our new campus, we would be struggling to learn about a new, unfamiliar place, losing the sense of legacy that comes with being a part of our original school community. Beyond the emotional challenges, changes to family routines should also be considered. Parent drop-offs and pickups are already a carefully coordinated effort. Introducing a new location creates chaos for families whose routines are tied to their current schedules and routes. For some, this change might make transportation nearly impossible, especially for working parents. In conclusion, moving the school would bring consequences that may outweigh the benefits. JSTEM is more than just a building, it is the center of many students' lives. Please prioritize the well-being, stability, and happiness of the students by reconsidering this decision, or at least looking for alternatives. Personally, last year I struggled a lot with my mental health. My band director and band best friend, who is in JMS, helped me a lot. I grew close with them, and moving to Kitty Hawk, I would lose a lot of my connections to them. I also know a lot of friends that feel the same way. This could also damage JMS students' mental health, as they will probably lose their JSTEM friends. Thank you for listening and always putting the needs of the students first.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Tammy Weekland regarding the JSTEM move to Kitty Hawk.
Good evening, members of the board, administrators, and fellow parents. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here as a concerned parent to propose an alternative solution to the current plan of moving all grades from JSTEM to Kitty Hawk. While I understand the intention to streamline resources and enhance educational opportunities, I believe a more balanced approach would better serve the students, staff, and our community. Specifically, I suggest moving only the 6th and 7th grade classes to Kitty Hawk, and allowing the incoming 8th graders to complete their final year at JSTEM. The alternative provides a smoother transition for several important reasons. The transition to a new school environment is already challenging for students, especially those in their final year of middle school. For 8th graders, this is a time when they are preparing to transition to high school, and they need stability. Uprooting them from the relationships and routines they've cultivated could lead to increased anxiety and stress. Allowing them to remain at JSTEM for their final year offers a sense of continuity, fostering emotional well-being during this critical period of development. Many 8th grade students have worked hard to earn leadership positions and roles in athletics, band, orchestra, and even after-school clubs and organizations. These accomplishments are the result of years of dedication and teamwork. Moving them to Kitty Hawk would disrupt those achievements, placing them in new environments they would need to start over. This change could diminish their sense of pride and motivation. Keeping the incoming 8th graders at JSTEMs ensures they can fully enjoy the fruits of their hard work in their final year of middle school. As a side note, JSTEM teachers are not crossing grades. Each grade level has its own group of teachers. I also have a question for you to ponder. Have you considered the impact to JMS regarding STAR scores when you remove a large portion of the higher scores? By leaving the existing seventh graders going into eighth grade at JMS, the potential change in STAR scores will likely be a more gradual change instead of falling off a cliff. Middle school, however, is not just about academics. It's also about building lasting friendships and creating memories. The eighth grade represents the culmination of those formative years. By allowing them to stay at JSTEM, we honor the bonds they have formed with peers and teachers, reinforce the values of our community and tradition that our district prides itself on. Instead of relocating all the grades, I propose a phased transition. Move incoming 6th and 7th graders to Kitty Hawk, giving them time to adjust to their new environment. Keep the incoming 8th graders at JSTEM to complete their final year with the stability and support they need. The approach, this approach achieves the district's goals while prioritizing the well-being of our students and maintaining the academic excellence and leadership opportunities we value. In conclusion, I urge the board to consider the impact that such a significant transition would have on our students and adopt a plan to prioritize their mental health and well-being, academic performance, and personal growth. Our children deserve a thoughtful approach that acknowledges their hard work and supports their success. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. I'm confident we can work together to come up with a viable solution. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Edgar Patch regarding growth and planning.
Board Directors, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk. I've been a member of Judson ISD or not a member of the board or anything, but I've been in Judson ISD for over 30 years. I actively started watching what was going on with the district for the last maybe 4 years. And I've been actively involved in this particular board since, I guess, January of last year. And I got involved with the growth and planning meeting because I wanted to see what was going to go on with Judson. We're building a new middle school, a new elementary school. We're going to have to draw lines. And I watched what happened during that meeting. And what we just heard from these previous speakers is more discussion about JSTEM than was ever discussed at a growth and planning meeting. And then we had a vote at the growth and planning meeting, and that's the first time JSTEM got brought up, moving it from Judson Middle School to Kitty Hawk. And then I heard at the last board meeting that the growth and planning meeting, our board meeting group, recommended that. What happened at that meeting was we were given choices to vote on. One that was really outrageous, like door number 1, and then door number 2, which was not so bad, and it had JSTEM moving. That's the first time it ever got brought up. And now, and everybody's kind of talking about JSTEM. I wouldn't be talking about this except that I have a granddaughter that goes to JSTEM. So when we were doing that growth and planning meeting, I paid particular attention to that. I wanted to see what was going on for her, but I mean, there's some good moves in there that the growth and planning meeting presented, but that wasn't part of the entire group that was there. I begin to think that the district already knew what they were going to do, and they were just making us feel like we were part of it, when really we weren't part of it. You guys already knew. And I was really disheartened, I was really kind of upset that when the recommendation said, to move JSTEM, came from a growth and planning meeting, and I was part of that, that wasn't quite true. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Callum Johnston, discussing Wortham Oaks Spanish Immersion Program.
Hola, soy Callum Johnston y estoy en el cuarto grado del programa SEEP en mi escuela Wortham Oaks. It is a challenge to learn a new language, but I think it's a good idea to learn Spanish since I live in Texas. And in Texas, a lot of people speak Spanish. Not to mention that Mexico is really close to Texas, and it is very probable that we will do services with them. Yo fui muy afortunado because I got into the Spanish immersion program. Today I am sad that the kids in kindergarten will not get to have our experiences, and the kindergarten teachers might not get to recommend students to join the Spanish immersion program if you take it away. El programa es importante y te ayuda a comunicarte con otros hispanos. It is a good idea that we are being immersed in Spanish early because it is easier to learn a new language when you are young. Lamentablemente, that means regrettably, the SIP teachers might not be able to teach Spanish immersion any longer at our school. I am asking you to please not take the Spanish immersion program away. Por favor, no cortes este programa. Gracias.
Thank you. Next, we have London Anderson speaking about the Spanish immersion program.
Buenas tardes, Dr. Fields y Judson School Board members. Yo soy London Anderson. Estoy en el cuarto grado en el Spanish Immersion Program de Wortham Oaks Elementary School. I want to begin by thanking you for giving me the opportunity to learn a second language ever since I was in kindergarten. This Spanish Immersion Program may help me in my profession in the future. Then I will be able to speak Espanol fluently to the people who come from Spanish-speaking countries. It will also help me speak to my abuela better as she comes from Panama. The Spanish Immersion Program also allows me to make more friends around the world who are not bilingual and only speak Spanish. Being in the program allows me to aprender and elaborate strategies mejor since I am able to speak Spanish. Some people are upset at the fact that the Spanish Immersion Program may be discontinued. The students are one of the people who are affected by this decision. They won't be able to learn Spanish anymore, so please consider keeping the Spanish Immersion Program in our district and allow us to be prepared for the world as any kid in any other country. I hope you value that speaking more than one language is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sherry Pegram, Spanish Immersion Program. Is it Pegram or Pegram? Pegram. Good, I got it right on the first one.
Good evening, members of the school board, administrators, and fellow parents. My name is Sherry Pegram, and I am the proud parent of a first grader in the Spanish Immersion Program at Wortham Oaks Elementary. I'm here tonight to express my deep concern about the proposed phasing out of this invaluable program. I'm here to advocate for its continuation, not only for the benefit of our students, but for the long-term success and reputation of our school and district. While I understand the need to address budgetary concerns, I believe phasing out the Spanish Immersion Program would be a short-sighted decision. Growing class sizes indicate that this program has moved past its initial startup phase and is now on a path toward greater financial sustainability. As cohort sizes increase, the per-student cost of running the program decreases. Immersion programs may require upfront investment. However, these costs are offset by long-term financial benefits like increased enrollment, higher school ratings, and external funding opportunities. Eliminating this program risks driving families to neighboring districts or private schools, which would ultimately hurt our district's funding and reputation. Our school's Spanish Immersion Program has become a unique and distinguishing feature of our school. It attracts families to the district and enhances diversity of educational offerings. In a competitive educational landscape, programs like this set our district apart. By removing the program, we risk losing a key factor that contributes to our school being the best-rated elementary school in the district. There's a strong support for this program among the community. Rather than sacrificing this invaluable program, I urge the board to explore alternative solutions to address budgetary concerns. These could include pursuing federal and state grants for dual language programs, partnering with local businesses, universities, or cultural organizations that might sponsor the program, For example, UTSA sponsors SAISD for their language immersion programs. Perhaps we could do something like that. Increasing the class sizes or charging a tuition fee to enroll in the program. Not ideal, but I think there are parents willing to do it, speaking personally. In closing, I urge the board to view the Spanish immersion program as an investment in our students, our school, and our district's future. Let's not diminish what makes Wortham Oaks exceptional. Let's ensure that future generations of students can continue to thrive in this unique and enriching program. Thank you for your time and consideration. And if I could just add one other thing, it seems tonight I'm realizing the concern is regarding grades 3 through 5 have lower class sizes. And I 100% agree that that's not financially smart. But if you look at grades 1 and 2, we're at full capacity. The full class size is 18. They reached that number, and there was a wait list. So the interest is there. Even if you were to increase the class size to 20, 23 even, you'll see that classroom filled. The interest is there. My assumption is, and I don't know, but my assumption is the class sizes were intentionally kept small as the program was being piloted, because we're only in our 5th or 6th year, so that would be my assumption for why the class sizes were small initially. But I know people show up at the school before school even starts to drop off an application. That's what I did. So people want this program. There is enthusiasm there. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Blanca Maldonado, discussing the elementary plan.
Good evening, board. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you guys about the Spanish immersion program at Wortham Oaks. I currently have 2 students enrolled in the program, one in 3rd grade and one in 5th grade. I think my question is actually out the window, because from my understanding from the last meeting, the proposed changes were for the Spanish immersion program to be merged with dual language at Selma Elementary. I walked in this evening and saw this at the table, and I'm very happy with these changes. So I am wondering what happened between the last meeting and today to see what happened to how these proposed changes came to fruition. So, currently the proposed changes says that y'all are going to start phasing out, and I'm very happy about that, because that would mean that my 3rd grader would continue the Spanish immersion program all the way through 5th grade. However, I will say that the phasing out program, it is for us, it has been a very personal enrichment for both of my daughter's education. So I do think it's a disservice for us to discontinue the Spanish immersion starting for the 1st grade classroom for the incoming kids that are coming into Wortham Oaks. Just on a personal note, I can tell you the difference between my 3rd grader and my 5th grader. The 5th grader has, because she's learned Spanish, obviously we are of Mexican descent, she has, because she is learning Spanish, she has more of a cultural pride in herself, and she has, and I know that's going to come with my 3rd grader as well. So my actually original question was going to be from my understanding, the strategy of the reasoning of why I wanted to move the Spanish immersion program to Selma Elementary was because of capacity issues, and from my understanding, the current Spanish immersion students that are enrolled right now were not asked whether they were gonna move to Selma Elementary. So I don't think, and I know specifically for the 3rd grade class, most of the students would have stayed at Wortham Oaks despite the Spanish immersion program stopping or continuing. So I don't think that would have alleviated the population issue or that capacity issue. So that was my original question, but I am interested to hear sort of what your proposed changes are and how that discussion went between last meeting and today. So I thank you. We are very excited about these proposed changes, so I am here to say that we are in agreement. I can tell you that the 3rd grade class and our 5th grade class for sure were very passionate about being here and saying that we agree with wanting for them to finish out the Spanish immersion program. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope that you guys stick with these proposed changes.
Thank you, ma'am. That is all of the requests to speak that I have. So we will continue on to item 3A, discussion of attendance zones and campus boundaries. Dr. Fields.
Yes, ma'am. So tonight, yes, sir. Oh, So tonight, what we wanted to do is re-go through the recommendations. In addition, in accordance with the recommendation from the board, we wanted to provide an opportunity for community members to come in and give their feedback. One of the things I'd like to ask before we get started, though, is I know that we have Ms. Rector here, who was on the Growth and Planning Committee. Is she still here?
I think she stepped out.
She had to step out. Gotcha. She had to take a phone call. So then what I'd ask at this point is that Mr. Brooks come up. We also have our demographer here as well, Bob Templeton. And he was one of the ones that went, yes. Oh, Crystal came back in. So would you mind? I'm sorry so much, Crystal. Do you mind giving a little bit of feedback on she's been on the Growth and Planning Committee even back when I was on it. So she knows how it works, but she was also there during this time as well. So if you could just talk about your experience, and then I'm sure Mr. Templeton and Mr. Brooks will speak to exactly the process that we went through to garner the information that then was submitted by that committee to bring back to the board.
Including JSTEM.
Well, they're going to talk about everything that we recommend.
Because she just walked in, so she didn't know.
Again, I'm asking her to talk about her experience with the committee, and then they're going to talk about exactly what would happen. But you can go through the JSTEM part too, if you'd like.
Yes, I was just going to comment on the most recent Growth and Planning meeting that I attended, and my understanding of that process and what we were doing there, what our purpose was at that meeting. And what I understood is that we were presented with two plans. We were to review, and we were presented the two plans, we were to review the plans, and then collaboratively decide which plan was the best plan of the two that were presented. And what was to come of that is that presentation would be presented to the board of our recommendation. So during the meeting, both plans were presented. They went over each and every detail from elementary, middle school to high school. And at the very end of that, there were some questions asked and answered. People gave their input at that meeting. And at the end, we were taking a vote by hand. Plan 2 was ultimately the plan that best fit in regards to the committee that was there. And looking around, there were a lot of people, not only committee members, but also community members. Looking around, there were a ton of hands up for Plan 2 as opposed to Plan 1.
Thank you so
That was just
much.
my understanding of that. That was our purpose, was to give a recommendation for the board.
Now, Mr. Brooks and the demographer will
May we ask a
actually.
question if we have one while she's still there?
Sure.
Okay. Ms. Rector and I are friends. We're Judson Middle School parents together, JSTEM parents together. But of the 3 meetings last year for Growth and Planning that worked on it, and
There
the
were 4.
the 4 last year and the 4 this year that we've had so far to get to this point, how many of those were you in attendance at?
I was in attendance at the most recent meeting.
Most recent one, not at the
Yes.
other 7. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Correct. So now Mr. Brooks is going to speak to how we, thank you so much, Ms.
Thank
Rector.
you, Ms. Rector.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to just put out there too, to kind of set the stage. I understand, and of course, I requested that we have this meeting, and thank you, colleagues, for addressing and agreeing to have the meeting. But the area that I'm most concerned about, and it's not like horribly concerned, but the board needs to weigh in. I think that's what I said last time. And when we weigh in, we're weighing in at the end of the process rather than in the beginning.
Correct.
Because I know you're diligently doing your work with your cabinet to bring an intelligent recommendation to us. But sometimes during that process, board members may have suggestions, but we're not entertaining the questions or the dialogue until this point, which by the time we're at this point, it's a little late to do some of the other things we may recommend. And so that's probably my biggest frustration, but I know you do the work, and I know you met with the community. The other, just for putting it out there, growth and planning, again, does not reflect the whole community.
Correct.
And that's the other concern I had. You're taking input from a sector of a community that's active, but not the whole community. And as I reiterated, this whole board is the entire community. So today, we'll listen to some suggestions. I reviewed them prior to the meeting. I think a lot of them are solid. It's hard when you have to make these decisions, but I just wanted the audience to know that the premise behind this meeting isn't to restate everything. It's really just to kind of get input from the board, from community members, and I'll just, since you mentioned Ms. Rector, she's in my district, and we talk a great deal about things, and so I'm happy that she's in my district. But bottom line is, this is our opportunity. And so we, at least I try to, not say anything in growth and planning, because that's basically 2 bites at the apple, if you will, right? We only want one, right, here in the boardroom. But we're hearing it now, and now we're being told we have to make a decision by December's meeting, which does not give us a great deal of time to really reevaluate things. But I just say that because, again, it's harder to work when we're behind. And so as a true team, we would need to start workshops much earlier, and that way we can provide you some leadership and guidance on what we're hearing that may be helpful. But, and
I
again,
appreciate the feedback, but we did meet with the board and talked about going into the growth and planning meeting, going back to August. So if there was feedback that we needed to carry into the growth and planning meeting, we could have taken that back in August.
well, we didn't meet with the demographer. I don't recall the demographer coming here. I mean, there were all these details that the growth and planning had. We did not. So again, if there's, I mean, I can be honest. If I'm frustrated, that's the one part. But again, I did evaluate your plan.
Yes, sir.
I do feel it's a strong plan. We are working wrinkles, and I know you've told me you're looking through how to make it stronger, and we take input from our community. That's such an important piece of it. And so I'll step down and let you continue, but I just want to make sure that was noticed.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. Again, my name is Dan Brooks. As Dr. Phil stated, tonight's agenda is to review the plan that we brought last month and to get feedback and input from the public regarding the recommendations for the attendance lines along with opening of the new schools. And so since August of 24, we began to meet with the Growth and Planning Committee to speak about the proposed attendance lines associated with Cibolo Creek Middle School and with Selma Elementary School. And as we stated, we wanted to address all of the attendance lines, not only for those two, opening up those two new schools, but also looking at district-wide, a comprehensive plan district-wide, knowing that we were going to have to address the entire district as far as boundaries are concerned. Important to note is that the Growth and Planning Committee was made up, again, of several groups of people. We had community members, we had staff members, we had principals and directors, some staff members who are parents who basically were serving in dual roles, and then even some of the board members came, maybe a couple as parents in the district, but was there as well as part of the committee. As we began to speak about the Growth and Planning Committee, several things started to come up as concerns. So tonight our plan is to go over what the recommendations were once again, so that we kind of have a refresher of what we talked about. And then we'll get more kind of into the details of what the recommendations were for elementary, middle, and high school. And then we'll have an opportunity for questions, answers, and input from whomever would like to give it. Again, the agenda tonight is talk about future growth and rezoning needs for JISD. And as that came as recommendations for the Growth and Planning Committee, once again, a comprehensive district-wide rezoning recommendation. And so what I want to do is go over the process of how we got here. So we started the Growth and Planning meetings back in August. There were 4 that we had August 16th, September 23rd, October 28th, and November the 6th. And as Dr. Fields mentioned, Bob Templeton, our demographer who is here tonight, he was able to come in and speak to the committee on several occasions and provide us with recommendations moving forward. As we move forward, he talked about the projected school enrollment numbers and how if they were left as they are, as far as the attendance lines, how our district would look moving forward if we did not make adjustments to the attendance lines. And so we talked about how we could move those attendance lines around to either increase or decrease numbers at different schools based on the forecasted projections that Mr. Templeton provided to us. The enrollment numbers came in projections for annual increases or decreases based on housing reports, potential bills, and communities that were being developed within our district. And it was a forecast over the next 10 years. Also, he provided us with original numbers that were given to us based on that. There being not changing the attendance lines, and where we saw that schools were going to be bigger, we started to think about ways that we can make adjustment to decrease those numbers. And then schools that were declining in enrollment, we were trying to come up with ways to increase those numbers. And so that was the task of the committee. And so when we got into the different meetings, we came up with some activities during the growth and planning meetings. And one of the meetings, we divided the groups up into threes, and we gave them the enrollment numbers. And so we just had the committee look at the enrollment numbers and just basically provide feedback to us and kind of analyze, based on what we saw of those numbers, what were some ideas, what were some thoughts that we could come up with to address any trends that we saw, any declining numbers, or any increasing numbers as it related to the campuses that we were talking about.
So, Mr. Brooks, when we did that, you could walk around, put notes on a sheet or give feedback, where we then gave that to Mr. Templeton and said, hey, here's some ideas that we can try out.
That is correct, sir.
That was the first or second meeting?
I believe that was the second or third meeting.
It was September? Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's when we started to receive the feedback that started to manifest itself in some of the recommendations that came out of the committee?
Correct.
Through those notes where people went around and put that stuff down?
That's correct, sir.
Yes, sir.
That is correct. And so one of those activities included identifying what were the top 3 highest enrolled campuses, and then what were the top 3 lowest enrolled campuses, and then what were some ideas, suggestions on how to address those particular campuses. And so based on that, there were ideas written on paper. We had butcher paper or the large sticky notes that folks walked around and did basically a gallery walk and wrote down their thoughts, their ideas as to how they thought we could how we could address those issues. The last station of those groups was a program station. Basically, people gave us recommendations on, I think one of them was the Mark Twain School. There was a recommendation to potentially make Cibolo Creek Middle School a STEM school. And then there was discussion about, I think that's when the idea of Spanish immersion being moved over to Selma Elementary came out. And so all of those different things came out of the groups walking around doing the gallery walk, and then we give that information to Mr. Templeton. He goes into his software, does his magic, and comes back to us with a recommendation, with a couple of recommendations that, as we called it, starter plans, basically. And so next, we want to talk about the demographer's presentations that he held throughout the growth and planning meeting. Again, he talked about housing trends. Mr. Templeton went over new home developments and multifamily units, growth and boundaries based on what we could determine was going to be future growth within our district. These were just proposals. And so he also talked about, again, as number 3 states here, he gave us starter plans for the elementary, middle, and high school rezonings. And when I say starter plans, he put some plans together as recommendations.
Based on the feedback from the gallery. Based
on the feedback that had different scenarios, programs moving, feeder patterns moving, all of those types of things. And then based on those 2 plans that he came up with, we then presented and started having discussions about what looked good, what didn't, what tweaks could we make, that type of thing. And then we also had some discussion on the facility usage capacities, the campuses, and we'll get in a little bit more about that as I continue into the presentation. Rezoning plans overview. To get to the recommendation that came from the Growth and Planning Committee, we went through each level, elementary, middle, and high school. The main things that came out of the elementary level was the attendance lines for the new Selma Elementary, looking at enrollment numbers at Rolling Meadows, looking at the feeder pattern for Candlewood Elementary. We eventually put that into a format, delivered it to the Growth and Planning Committee, and they came back with a recommendation for the elementary level that we'll talk about. I'll get into the details of it a little bit later. At the middle school level, we looked at the enrollment numbers that would be put in place based on where they were going. We were going to draw the attendance lines for the new middle school. And again, because of that, we had to look at the entire district and what the numbers of the middle schools in the district were going to look like across all of our middle schools. And so we wanted to make sure that we're able to kind of, as best we could, even out those numbers. We looked into the feasibility of what it would look like if we were to close down middle schools, and what came from that recommendation, a suggestion of closing down the middle school. The committee did not recommend closing. Again, that was an idea that was put out during the committee meetings, but as far as a recommendation from the entire committee to close a middle school, that was not a recommendation that came forward. As far as a high school, we looked at the individual high schools and how many students were at each high school and what number of enrollment students could be at each campus. And so we looked at high school, with Judson High School being the largest capacity high school with the number of about, I think it's 3,600 for Judson High School, Wagner High School at about 2,400, and then Veterans Memorial at about a 2,000.
224.
I'm sorry?
2,024.
Gotcha.
Yep.
2024?
2,000 to
24. Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
I apologize.
You're good. Thank you, sir. So we started looking at how we could align our students' enrollment to meet the capacity numbers for those 3 high schools. All right. Next, we'll get into the committee recommendations. And again, we talked about the process that we went through to get to the recommendations that were made by the committee. We did have the committee look at several different factors within, as Ms. Rector mentioned, the Plan 1 and Plan 2. As they looked over what was best that met the district's growth and attendance needs, as well as what will ensure equitable student distribution across the campuses, Plan 2 was voted on, and I'll get into what Plan 2 is. And then I'll also be able to show a map of what, boundaries, potential boundaries could look like. Now, before I get into those recommendations, I want to make sure that we understand that the recommendation that we brought to the board from the committee addresses the strategic planning for the long-term growth. We feel like it's an efficient use of the new and the existing facilities, and it gives the board an option or ability to work from as we provide direction on how we are to move forward. Want to get into the recommendations and open it up for discussions after I do that. Now, finally, right before I get to the recommendations, there were some things that were discussed in the growth and planning that did not come to the forefront as formal recommendations to the board. And some of them was that there was a discussion or a suggestion to possibly close JECA. There was a discussion again to possibly close Judson Middle School and potentially consolidate and the resources and redistribute students throughout the district. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, there was a discussion of possibly making Cibolo Creek Middle School a STEM academy. And so again, those 3 things were brought up in the committee, but were not brought forth as a formal recommendation to the board. And so that is how we got here. And so here is the actual recommendations that came from the Growth and Planning Committee. First one is the elementary recommendations.
So I'd ask the board, were there any other questions or dialogue about the process?
Do we have these slides? These are not what was in board book. I've never seen these.
What slides are we talking about? These right here?
Right. Did we upload those?
I have a
Can we
completely.
get those to the board?
Well, we'll get it to them.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I have a completely different slide deck, so I'm not sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, we'll send them.
Any other questions about the process? Yes, ma'am.
About what he just went over.
Yes. I noticed one of our citizen speakers mentioned that JSTEM wasn't discussed till the last meeting, and I just want to clarify when JSTEM came into consideration.
JSTEM came into consideration, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Templeton, Mr. Brooks, Cabinet, you were all there. We did the gallery walk, and there were several recommendations that found themselves on Post-it notes that were put on the sheets during the gallery walk.
When was that?
I believe that was the second.
September?
That was September? Second or third? So what happened is, as we started to look at, eventually we had to really break down the split between Kitty Hawk, because that's where most of the students were going to go, to Cibolo Creek. And then we saw the numbers at Kitty Hawk go down. But we still had about, between 1,200, 1,300 students at Judson Middle. If you combine the student, I'm looking at the cabinet now, if you combine the students and JSTEM. So we had the capacity to move students from Judson Middle to Kitty Hawk, and we could move that programmatic change because there was room on the campus at this point. In addition, we had a building now at Kitty Hawk that we could literally dedicate to the JSTEM program. It was the 1,000 building. And that started to get some traction. So in an effort to increase the numbers over at Kitty Hawk from what was going to be a projected, I believe, between 500 and 600, bringing them up to 800 or 900 would be to relocate that program over to Kitty Hawk. So then it started to be talked about. I know it was extensively talked about in the final meeting, but that's not the first time it was brought up to us because we got it in the gallery walk.
Okay, so people in the committee felt that that was something that needed to be looked at.
They were, what we asked for when we did the gallery walk, and again, the cabinet was there, we asked for suggestions on programs at the elementary level, at the middle school level. That was one of the recommendations that came in, on the sticky notes, on the gallery walk.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Fields, would you like me to elaborate a little bit
Please.
more on that? So during one of those meetings, part of the activities that took place was a facilitated gallery walk with several stations. One of the stations was part of the data that we presented to the Growth and Planning Committee, which included the capacity numbers and the enrollment projections. And then also just the current enrollment. And we highlighted 3 of the campuses that had the highest enrollment in one station, and we asked for feedback, and everybody received Post-its from the community as far as what are some of your ideas, suggestions, or concerns. Then there was another station that highlighted the 3 lowest enrollment campuses with the same similar question. And then there was a station that just highlighted, as far as programs are concerned, what is it that you'd like to see? In Mr. Templeton's discussion, there was also a lot of discussion related to some of the things that you also need to consider would not just be necessarily redrawing boundary lines, but consideration of program movement, in which case just organically the conversations and comments that were made, which were he mentioned earlier, such as program shifts, Spanish immersion, that's how JSTEM came up. Not just in Post-it notes, but through facilitated discussion, through stations, and just feedback that we heard from the committee. It was in, I believe, the 3rd of the planning meetings in which then that was part of one of the recommendations in which the committee voted for. And then more conversation was had before there was even a voting session. I hope that provided
No, that
further
helps.
clarification.
Mr. Templeton, did you want to add to that?
I would just add with these projects that we do about a dozen of these a year with many districts. And it does come down to those points of you can adjust boundaries and you can move programs. So there's two ways to solve a problem. And in the Cibolo Middle School case, because of the location, it has to draw its students off of Kitty Hawk. There's no other way for that location to draw kids into them except from Kitty Hawk. So then, in order to backfill Kitty Hawk, you either have to take elementary zones from Judson Middle, or, which was where this recommendation came from, move the JSTEM. So that represents about 400 students to then get that Kitty Hawk number to a more reasonable number. But it definitely came as a part of, I believe, the third meeting is when this started to percolate up as a
Option to consider.
Yes, sir. And in addition, I would say, Ms. Stanford, that right now, the way that our feeder pattern works for the high schools is you have 2 for veterans, 2 for, in terms of middle schools, 2 for Judson and 2 for Wagner. If we were to, when we move the students from Kitty Hawk to Cibolo Creek, if we were to now rezone students from Judson Middle to Kitty Hawk, then what would happen is you would decrease the numbers even more at the largest capacity high school that we have in the district.
Were they able to assess any of the potential disadvantages to parents, or was that really discussed, such as extra travel time or cost to families, or were they even able to assess that?
I would tell you that definitely that's a consideration that was taken, but Wortham Oaks has been dealing with that when it comes to their students having to go to Kitty Hawk 4 years. That was part of the motivation for opening up Cibolo Creek Middle School. We said in the beginning during this process that we're getting ready to have to draw lines for middle school and a new elementary. And we told the board that we wanted to address all of the attendance line issues that we could at this one point, rather than coming back annually, having such a huge disruption. We knew that whatever recommendations came forward, there would be an inconvenience for a certain group of the population. We tried to minimize that as much as we could. We had conversations with some of the teachers over at JSTEM, and they're amenable to coming over. There's a whole building. We had conversations with Kitty Hawk, where there's a whole building dedicated that could be used by JSTEM if they were to relocate.
So the JSTEM staff is going to move?
The JSTEM staff would.
Because that was one of the concerns mentioned.
Yes, ma'am. The staff would move,
Okay.
the students would move, the counselor would move, and the administrative oversight would move as well. So to the point, and I understand the recommendation to have the 8th grade came up.
Yeah, is
stay.
that feasible?
I talked to our transportation department today. They were not, the way that we work it right now when it comes to JSTEM is that those students are actually, they receive transportation to JSTEM, and they're picked up over various areas of the district. If they had to then pick up over those various areas and then relocate 6th and 7th grade to Kitty Hawk, and then retransport 8th grade to Judson Middle, they were telling me that they're not confident that we have the drivers to accommodate that.
I'm going to yield the mic so other people have it.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you let Jose go then?
Okay, mine's related to hers.
Thank you. Now, I want to say something positive, right? I talked a little bit of the frustration. I probably should be candid. From a 1 to 10, it might be a 4. It's not like really crazy. But there's still a little bit there, and obviously 0 is always better. But this is the part where I feel like the board has authority to do some different things that are recommended from administration. And so not being part of that conversation earlier, we couldn't entertain them. One of the things that I've always wanted to see is a K through 12 STEM academy, a really brand new one on a bond that we get and we target and we look at for long-range planning. It's not impossible to still dream that, but that would have been something to entertain possibly. The other thing that I would have liked to have seen is possibly the advent of intermediate programs, a 7th and 8th grade campus or a 5th and 6th grade campus, because we're seeing falls academically in middle school. So there's going to need to be greater emphasis in those areas, which I thought strategically would be really cool to possibly look at that. Those questions were never truly asked or really researched for the viability of those things. But this is the bright light in this situation. We still are quite fluid with enrollment and attendance because of the vouchers that are coming. We don't know what's going to happen with our campuses. So this is our best foot forward, but there's still opportunity for us to really entertain different ideas so that we can move forward in making this district more responsive academically. So I just wanted to put those thoughts just to get a sense of what I was thinking in terms of some ideas I would have wanted to at least ask in the early part, maybe in August or September, had I known that this was coming up. But again, it's still possible, right? So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
I appreciate that feedback. I'm not confident that we did go into this process with a recommendation for new programs, did we? Curriculum and instruction? We went into the process based on what we currently had in district and not really looking to come back to the board with a new program that could be implemented, that there would be cost associated, and we didn't know how that would go. Mrs. Ryan?
I just wanted to clarify some things on Ms. Stanford's original question about when this came up to growth and planning, because I have been at every single meeting as a parent and been on that committee back before it was even called growth and planning. So at the September 23rd meeting, I was part of the gallery walk. I was scribing for people as they threw ideas out there, because I don't get ideas, but I can write, type thing. And then we received a summary of those, and I still have that, because I never throw away a single piece of paper. Moving of JSTEM was never on the Post-it note recommendations or discussed at the September meeting. Also then, I was at the October meeting, and in fact, I watched the entire meeting this afternoon, because we did post that one to our YouTube page. The moving of JSTEM was not on the maps at the October meeting, and it was not discussed ever once. What the speaker said, that on November 6th was the very first time a single person in that room had heard anything about JSTEM moving, is factually correct. And I was in all those meetings, and people can go back and watch the video and verify. But just so you know, Ms. Stanford, that the committee didn't discuss all these things you're asking about, because it was never even brought up at the September or the October meeting for people to be able to talk about those types of considerations. The parents didn't know, like Coronado Village knew they were on the agenda, so they knew to come. But JSTEM didn't know they were on the agenda, so like those parents didn't know to come. All of a sudden, it was just voted on, and when they saw it at the November 6th vote, that was the first time that any of those committee members had ever seen that map, ever seen that course of action. It had never been discussed before, so, but I'm sure everybody can go back and verify that data.
Definitely, but are you trying to give the impression that we didn't have discussion about JSTEM? That all we did was vote on it?
The first discussion was on November 6th.
Understood, but in
Okay, yeah, no,
November
to
6th,
imply
did we
that we talked
discuss
about
it
it
in
in
November 6th?
Correct, November 6th, but no one knew it was on the agenda to be discussed on November 6th.
But it was
No
still
one had seen
discussed
that.
with the committee on November 6th. And again,
With the
these-
public, yes.
Right. So
That-
these are recommendations that we're bringing back to the board. If the board chooses not to move forward with the transfer of the program, then we're happy to do what we can to compensate. I'm just saying that right now, we have a school with between 12 to 1,300 students in it if you were to leave JSTEM at Judson Middle, and then you're going to have a Kitty Hawk campus with maybe 600 students in it, where we could even that out with that programmatic change and have a building dedicated to that program at that campus.
So it's the numbers. We're trying to smooth out.
We are. That was one of the goals of the entire committee as we went through this process, is to look at student enrollment, campus capacity, and how we could best make, how the committee could best make recommendations to the board. But to say that we didn't have discussions about this before the recommendations were made to the board at all is disingenuous.
No, I was just clarifying. You said it was on the post-it notes in the September meeting and that it was discussed in October. I just wanted to clarify that as a witness to those things and a recipient of the documents, I just wanted to say that I don't believe that that was true. I think maybe you're misremembering what happened at the meetings. But again, there's video of it, so everybody's welcome to go watch in case my recollection.
May I
from
add
today
to
is
that, Dr. Fields?
Please.
We had many members that came up individually. I know they came up individually to me. I know
stayed
they
late.
came up to you, to Dr. Brooks, to express their concerns, to express their ideas. So not only were they provided in writing, but part of this entire process was an organic process. We were open and transparent, and I remember staying at least an hour and a half after each meeting to just welcome people to come and talk to us. And that's exactly what happened. So I just
I
wanted to share
don't
that.
doubt, though, that Ms. Ryan watched all the videos and has the documentation to support. So I would say that if it didn't rise at that occasion, maybe it was the last meeting. I do remember bringing back information to me from Mr. Templeton and Brooks saying, hey, they talked about, or there was a recommendation for a programmatic change of moving the program from Judson Middle to Kitty Hawk as well.
I just don't think that came out of the Growth and Planning Committee. No one showed up to that meeting and said, hey, let's move JSTEM to Kitty Hawk. Like, that may have been Mr. Templeton's solution. I'm not saying it's not mathematically the right thing to do. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm just saying, I don't believe it was an idea that one of the members of the committee came up and said, hey, let's move it. I think it was just a mathematical result that equaled numbers out that, came through the math that occurs with demographers type thing, versus I just don't want the board to think that there were a bunch of Growth and Planning Committee members who brought this up and were advocating for it, because I don't think that's an accurate reflection. I think this is more of a mathematical solution that meets some of the criteria that the board should consider about balancing numbers out versus something driven from our community.
I don't want to give the board the impression that there was ever a bunch of Growth and Planning Committee members that advocated in any direction other than against the closing of JECA, the closing of Judson Middle, and what was the other one? Which one?
I think you're thinking about a board meeting that
No,
we had
I'm
that
talking
wasn't-
about when we brought it to the board, when we brought it to the Growth and Planning Committee, we asked, is there anyone who is in favor of, or do we have any interest in closing down JECA? Did we or did we not, Cabinet?
Dr. Fields, there was even a conversation, and I'm asking for correction if I'm wrong as well. I can remember us being in the space and committee members from Growth and Planning bringing up recommendations, and there being some audible gasps in the space, because it was just people throwing out ideas that we hadn't even discussed before. I know we talked about closing JECA. I know we talked about closing Kirby at one point.
Correct.
I remember the conversation about JSTEM and possibly looking for a dedicated building, because the conversation was, they're on the third floor, they're isolated from the other students. That's, to both Ms. Davis and Ms. Ryan's point, it was a very organic conversation. I'm not confident that everything we collected in those notes was actually what was said in the open meeting, because people were just literally like throwing out ideas, because I remember some of them being like, oh, we closed Kirby, we just like did a whole renovation there. That would be like a bad idea. So I just remember that it was a very, very organic conversation.
Correct.
Mr. Salinas?
Thank you. Mr. Brooks, I don't know whether when the demographer was doing all of this, was he aware about what's going to happen in the corner of Kitty Hawk and Windburn Trail? They are building 249 apartments, which would affect Crestview Elementary and Kitty Hawk Middle School. Was he aware of that?
I'm not sure. Mr. Templeton?
I'm looking at my data right now.
Now they've changed them to townhomes, from apartments to townhomes. I don't know whether they kept it. To me, I don't know how they're gonna put 249 apartments in that little corner. That's the entrance of my street, Windburn Trail.
Windburn?
They already started.
It's over by the, across the street
Right,
from
from
McDonald's
Yeah,
there.
right in front of
I'm pretty
McDonald's.
sure that was something that was mentioned.
Yes.
He spoke about
Oh,
an
he
apartment
took that.
complex up there, and he also spoke about the apartment location that's happening way down Kitty Hawk, by the Walmart, in back of the Walmart. You know what I'm saying? If you go all the way down in Universal City, because they're starting a apartment complex back there as well.
With that, I was not aware of that. I know they're gonna put some stores and
Yes, sir.
Chick-fil-A and I don't know what else.
And basically, what they were looking at, Mr. Salinas, is based on that, we should see an increase of numbers at particular campuses of this. Now, it wasn't one of the bigger areas that we were going to see some dramatic growth, is that I think you talked about, what was it, Copperfield? What were some of the other areas? Masters, Escondido, maybe, Elof, I think, was supposed to see some growth as well.
Currently
And
going on
Wortham
right now.
Oaks, naturally.
Okay. That's.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam President.
Any other questions on process up to now?
Just one real quick. In the splitting the movement of the JSTEM program to where eighth grade would stay, that would just be for 1 year, right?
It would be for 1 year, yes, ma'am.
Is that feasible to do that? I don't know about resources and costs that would be attached to doing it that way, but it was brought up, and
If you're asking me, could we get that done? I would stay up at night trying to calculate a way to get that done. When I heard it from Mr. Weekland, I felt like it wasn't unreasonable. When I went back, but I did tell Mr. Weekland I was going to come back and speak to the district about the feasibility. And when I spoke to transportation today, and I believe I brought it up in cabinet as well, I got the response of, we would like to move the current counselor and administration with JSTEM to the new building over at Kitty Hawk, because that keeps the consistency for all of those students. Which would mean that if you leave a grade level,
they would be
then-
losing.
and you'd have to
staff.
leave someone there in their state. And maybe just for a year, but someone would have to stay there counselor-wise for scheduling and administratively for oversight while the eighth grade stayed behind. But I would also say again that in all of these situations where we're recommending changes, there's going to be students affected that, you know,
Change is never,
exactly. That's why we wanted to go ahead and get through this process. Yes,
right.
ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have one real quick comment.
Yes, sir.
The thing that I left out on my notes earlier was just looking at Judson Middle School, and we've talked about that here in some of our planning meetings, and the facility's old.
Yes.
So there's obviously a need for a future bond, because again, when I look at allocation of resources, a brand-new school on one side with students being serviced with an older school at Judson Middle School, so we would eventually need a plan to upgrade that facility so it can be sustainable for us. So just putting that in there is, again, another strategy that we need to consider.
I'd go so far as to say this, Mr. Macias. I don't believe that Judson Middle was built for a middle school. It was built as the grade campus.
It was, my wife opened up that campus.
See what I'm
It was
saying?
a high school,
So it was
absolutely.
not built to be a middle school. It was built to be half the 9th and 10th graders. And then the 11th and 12th graders went to the red campus. And, you know, all the old people here at Judson remember that, you know. So there's a lot of things that we could do differently, especially just the storefront when you go to Judson Middle. It's difficult to find out where the front door is, you know. So there's some things that we could do to make some adjustments to that. But right now, we just felt like we'd have a campus with between 12 and 1,300 students at it, with another campus that could handle the capacity. They've been handling almost 1,400 Kitty Hawk for years now, where they can handle easily 800, 900 students over there, having one, again, building dedicated to the JSTEM program. Yes, ma'am.
So I've heard Ms. Ryan say this before, geography is not our friend. So if we're talking about moving all these students from Kitty Hawk to the new middle school, that is a definite factor at the number of students attending Kitty Hawk. It affects fewer students moving on to high school if we move a program than if we rezone attendance zones. For example, let's say we take a handful of students from over here and move them to Kitty Hawk. They would have normally gone to a different high school. Now they'll be going to a different high school, and that is something that really affects them that way. Or do we let them go back to the high school that they were zoned for originally, and provide that transportation? It's just really, it's very difficult. The students at JSTEM are already coming from all over the district, so they're not locked in the same way students at a middle school are locked into looking forward to their high school. I know that our fine arts and our athletics and other programs have worked really hard to build those relationships, reaching down and pulling up. Going, the coaches from the high schools are going down and helping coach the kids up. The
Coordinators.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
And the fine arts directors, the bands are doing a whole lot more trying to gain that interest. And moving a bunch of students around kind of changes that. So this is a way to fill up a school for right now, because there may be some things happen and we may have to move some kids back in 5, 10, 20 years. Change is hard. And there is no way to make everyone happy.
Understood.
That's kind of all I wanted to say about that.
So now if we could go through the recommendations and then have some dialogue about that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir. So the elementary school recommendation overview, one of the first things we wanted to talk about was, because we have to open Selma Elementary, we're going to be pulling the majority of the students that we need to go to that school from Rolling Meadows at an elementary school. And so we're going to, the plan, if we can click on that, the plan is to create a split at Kentucky Street. And if you could see on this map, okie dokie.
It's up there. Not that one.
Did it go?
No, it's not.
Yeah, it should be that link. Oh, okay. So Kentucky Street is in the zone of Rolling Meadows. And so at that street, I really wanted to be able to show it. Don't worry about it.
Can we also make a note at this point, hey, Ms. Ryan, remember you were saying, about it being difficult to see the streets involved and where we're at? This picture that we were able to get from Mr. Templeton is something that we've posted on the website. So now when people can bring this up from the growth and planning meeting, you can see the further you go in, you can see all the streets that align with what that recommendation. So you can even, if you cursor over a little bit, Savine?
Just scroll.
Right there, you can see Kentucky.
Okay, I see that you just post, or it doesn't say when, the interactive map now.
Right, we just got
Versus-
it.
Okay, all
Because
right.
they had to put this together. They
All
had
right,
to
no, I'm
go
just
down.
looking on the growth and
Yes,
planning
ma'am.
page, so now I see interactive map.
Correct. So
Okay.
now a person can go in, pull up these zones and find out exactly where they live, where the street is, and where they should be zoned to go.
Okay, because,
Yes.
we've had so much growth in some of those areas that the whatever PDF map was just missing a bunch
Well, the
of.
big one is going to be that Elof area. Remember, we didn't even have the streets.
Correct,
in.
there were
Now
no
you
streets, so
can see
nobody
exactly
could
which
really
ones-
tell
right.
where they were getting divided.
Yes, ma'am. All right, cool.
So again, that's where we're making the split at Kentucky Street, to be able to send those students into Selma Elementary School. Also.
Can I ask about Kentucky? Do you want us to go like line by line on each
Yes,
thing?
ma'am.
Major thing? So, okay, so at neither the September or the October meeting, MAPS had that Kentucky split in Selma. In fact, I know there was discussion of, making sure that groups stayed together in that attendance zone. But then both the plans that were presented for vote in November all of a sudden had the Kentucky split, even though no one had seen that in September or October. So what caused us to create that? I know last meeting we talked about whether or not there were sidewalks or not. I know everybody went and drove it and verified there are sidewalks through that entire neighborhood. Nobody has to walk on Lookout Road on the shoulder to get from any part of that neighborhood to the new elementary school. And I know we've also, somebody else, I can't remember who on the cabinet, talked about the importance of keeping neighborhoods together and having neighborhood schools. So if that was one of our goals in developing these plans, we've now split a neighborhood in half, where there's kids from, living next to each other, and all of a sudden one's going to another. So how did we get there, and is there a way to not get there? Because then we're also busing kids who are walkers, because there are sidewalks. So added transportation cost for that by having that neighborhood drive all the way over to Rolling Meadows when they are about 1.4 miles walking to the new Selma Elementary.
So then your recommendation then would be to push that, don't split it Kentucky, just take that whole side.
Keep that neighborhood together. That's what the community, a number of community members have reached out, and I've looked at the geography and driven that neighborhood. And the bus would literally have to drive by the walkers to get out of it, because there's only one way to get where the bus is getting out. There's a second way at the north end, but you got to come in on Amberley. And so they're not going to load them up, drive past all those kids, and then head all the way around. I'd rather be more financially efficient and not have to have a bus.
So then, Mr. Templeton, if you could make your way to the microphone, I guess what we're looking for.
Map back up?
Sure. What we're looking for is, what they're saying is, right here, in between Kentucky.
Right here.
Where you see the blue and the red for the people in the audience.
So there is-
Line of demarcation.
Wait a second. You
Correct.
don't have Kentucky split on, oh wait, yes you do. No,
We just need to zoom in.
this is not Kentucky split, I don't think,
No,
because
Is that not Kentucky?
I know that
zoom in, right over there. No, to between the red and the blue.
this is Kentucky right here.
See Kentucky Ridge? You see where it says Kentucky Ridge? Move the cursor down,
Oh, wait.
down,
Oh,
down,
not.
down,
Oh, yeah.
down. No, just
No,
the cursor.
drag.
Here, let me help out.
You go drive the train.
drive.
There's Kentucky Ridge right there.
So, you have it up.
It's right here.
Okay, where's the cursor? See, this is Kentucky right here. And what's being asked is, rather than have the line of demarcation be on Kentucky, move this all the way out to here. That way, all of these students in this neighborhood still come back to Selma Elementary over here. So what I'm asking at this point, Mr. Templeton, is how many kids are we talking about in this area right here? Then that would be taken out of Rolling Meadows and sent back to Selma Elementary.
Well, yeah, there's some apartments
that
south.
neighborhood, maybe.
Just the neighborhood, I think, is what I was thinking, because otherwise there are apartments just south of there before 1604 that are not walkable until the sidewalks get in, so.
And I would tell you this, Ms. Ryan, I went and drove that out, and I'm gonna ask, we've got Alex here too, they work in the transportation department. It's like a maze back in I mean, if you've driven around back there, it's like, I mean, there's 12 streets of changes before you can get to Selma Elementary if you walk through the neighborhood, if you don't come out on Lookout Road. And then if you do come out on Lookout Road, to your point, there's no sidewalks.
Not till next year. The MPO project's already approved. There's sidewalks going in all
Once we
along
get the
Lookout.
sidewalks in, we could come back and
1
readdress.
year.
But if we're talking about elementary age students, and if you've ever driven down Lookout Road, I'm not recommending that we send fourth and fifth graders to walk that walk. If we were to send them through the neighborhood, again, now they have to be able to navigate 10, 12 different streets in turns to get from their house to the elementary. So,
We're looking at about 109 students.
and then we'd be looking at about 109 students then, that would come from Rolling Meadows and go over to 109.
Is that
So-
including the apartments, or is that just that neighborhood?
Yes. The apartments are south of that, so it does include the apartments.
Where the apartments at exactly?
Well,
If you
there's-
point to it, I can do the little cursor dance.
All of those
It's,
apartments.
Oh,
it's
okay,
that
gotcha.
Brio
So
and
we're looking
Citadel
in
and
here.
Loretto.
Right here. But the line of demarcation is like from here all the way to here. So will we be picking up this entire community and then down?
Because you said that's the railroad.
So, Ms. Ryan, what you're talking about is including like Derby Run, Silver Rose, Derby Vista? And just that one little area? Or are you also talking about Cardinal Point, that little circle
So
there?
you're saying just don't split the neighborhood?
Yeah.
The neighborhoods.
I was just
further.
saying, don't split the neighborhood.
Got it.
So
And
that would not be as many
neighborhood
students
ends
then?
about right here, Bob. So we're talking.
Just trying to clarify.
This,
In what?
right.
Those are homes. It's a small little area right there. Yeah. No, they're big homes, but it's a small area.
Yeah, I just don't want, I know a bunch of kids that live right there, that literally live next to each other, split by Kentucky.
There isn't the access from Cardinal
40,
Point and
45
Larkspur that there is through the neighborhood.
About
So
45
that wouldn't be the right
students.
one.
So it would be less. It would be about 45 students.
So you could do the whole neighborhood.
We could
that
just
way.
do the neighborhood. That
Yeah,
way,
just
to
to
your
not-
point, we
not
don't
split
split
up
the
a neighborhood.
The 45 does not include the apartments.
Okay,
Right.
yes.
So, yeah.
All right, okay, Bill, sit down.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, is there, what, do we want to see if the gentleman at the end agree to before, we don't want them to change something unless,
Oh, we're not making a vote or anything.
oh, yeah,
we're
no,
just
I just want, I
discussing
don't want them to
tonight.
work on something that's not amenable
We've already.
to people.
Yeah.
We will.
Do you did you understand, Mr. Salinas, what we were talking about just now? And what we would do is, there's a neighborhood in Ratama that they have split, with part of it still continuing at Rolling Meadows and part going to the new elementary. And what Ms. Ryan is asking is that we keep that whole neighborhood together, which would be about 40 more students, would be the difference.
By not splitting Kentucky,
Correct.
not correct?
Yes, sir.
That,
Yeah,
that,
you don't have an issue with that?
that makes sense.
Okay.
No, I
I
don't
just want to
have
be sure
an-
we get feedback
I
from
don't-
everybody.
Right, I don't have an issue with
Mr.
that.
Macias?
And if
does
it's
that make
only
sense to you?
45 kids that are gonna remain in
That would go.
Rolling Meadows.
No, they would go from Rolling Meadows to the new school instead of remaining at Rolling Meadows.
Oh, okay.
Because the neighborhood is,
Then
right
that
now,
includes
part of
the
that neighborhood
45.
is designated to go to the new school.
And that includes the 45?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I would add that my question you answered already. I wanted to know the impact of students. And
Right.
if it's roughly that, remember too that kiddos go to different schools. So I would just say make sure that they're all together anyway, because if they're going to a different program at ELOF or whatnot,
Right.
then, but I think on the surface, it sounds viable. I think it makes sense.
And I would tell you going forward, Mr. Brooks is going to have a recommendation on how we could even those numbers out for the new elementary as well. The sliver,
Yes, sir.
we refer to it as the little part in the back, but you'll be able to make that recommendation.
Yes, sir.
The sliver.
Okay, so we're done with the split, Kentucky Street?
Yes, sir.
Good on
And
that?
make that change though as we move
Yes, sir.
forward, please.
Mr. Templeton has it.
All right.
So the next item is, as has been discussed, recommendation brought forth will be Coronado Village relocating the staff and the students to Selma Elementary School.
So we could repurpose that school for something else at a later date. We're not closing it down, we're not, looking to sell it. We're saying we're going to we need that facility space for several different reasons.
Yes, sir. Next, we talk, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious about the cost of maintaining it empty, because we don't know what we're going to do with it. That's going to be a decision later
It would be
made.
a decision later.
In the spring.
The cost would be minimal of maintaining it empty, but that would not be a recommendation on my part. There's several different things that we could do with that area that I would recommend that we do.
I mean, we're saving 4.5 million
In terms of.
startup cost at some.
We are, because now we don't have the faculty. But what I'm saying, in terms of facility use, there's other things that we could use for office space. There's people all over the district doubled up in rooms that we could use it for. There's a host of different things that we could use it for. Now, if the board were to come back and say, to Mr. Macias's point that he made earlier, I'd like to see this type of campus. Well, then, to your point, we're going to have to hire new administration, new faculty, new staff to be able to manage one of those programs at that campus.
Right, okay.
But you'd be making that recommendation fairly soon,
Correct.
right? Once
I'd
we
like to
approve
see it
this.
happen,
We want
right.
to get this to happen, and then you would
Yes, ma'am.
say, okay, so if that's going to happen, then this is what we think we would want it. It wouldn't sit vacant for years.
Right, so you're talking about a few months.
That would, and it's not going to sit vacant, because what the recommendations we're making now don't come into play until fall of 2025. So we can still talk about what we're going to do to repurpose that facility prior to that point, and then we'll be able to make those moves after that point as well. But it's not like, once you guys make the decision in December, Coronado's going to start to relocate to Selma, because it hadn't even been built yet. It's not completed.
Right. So, that'd be part of our budget discussion.
Yes, ma'am?
For the
Correct.
budget that we're going into work on.
Correct.
Would include that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Salinas had something?
We are saying that we're going to open Selma Elementary
Yes, sir.
because everything is going on schedule.
Yes, sir.
Are we prepared in case it's not ready, that those students from Coronado, are they going to remain on Coronado and the staff until they're able to move to the new elementary?
Yes, sir. And I would tell you that we wouldn't be, if, the same scenario with the middle school, but those are just contingency plans. But right now, we are on time and under budget to finish those facilities on time. And it should be done before school opens. We're looking in July, not August.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
yes, sir.
thank you, sir.
Mr. Macias, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I also wanted to mention the distinction between some of our neighboring districts having to close schools, and our approach is to still utilize our facilities. But I think it can't be lost that the intent of administration is to lower the campus enrollment so that they can address students almost one-on-one. So the idea, I think, is smart. It's something that this board had approved years ago, to have a 21-to-1 student-teacher ratio, but funding, we just couldn't sustain that. So the idea is that smaller campuses will produce stronger academic outcomes. So I just wanted our community to know that that's part of the equation in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Ryan?
As I went back through all the slides, the Coronado Village portion got me confused, because in September and October, when the committee was going over their stuff, all the maps and all of the discussion was that the dual language, which was kids who are already on a bus, being bused from all over the district.
Yes, ma'am.
Just have the bus keep driving another 5, whatever, up to Selma Elementary, because those were kids who were already
Yes, ma'am.
being transported anyway. And the maps we had in September and October in the discussion was that the attendance zone itself of Coronado Village was not going to exist anymore, that was going to be split between France and Olympia, because those were low enrollment campuses also. So in order to get, France up over 300 some students, that attendance zone was going to be split. And then November, we came back, and all of a sudden it was a leapfrog attendance zone. All of a sudden, you got this little pocket And I was in the pockets gonna drive by other schools and go over to the Selma Elementary. And I'm not sure, anytime, I know a lot of the things that the committee had talked about was, it's that I-35 1604, quad of death that will exist under construction for the next decade. And any ways we have where people don't have to cross over 35 or don't have to, get on 1604 or anything like that, was one of the things people were concerned about, because you get one accident or one little bit of construction, buses aren't getting where buses need to go. So now we have a pocket over here of Coronado of just general education students, they're not in the dual language program, who are, I think, even almost less than 2 miles from Franz, and some of them less than 2 miles from Olympia, that we're now going to send a bus over there and bus them along 1604, 35 over to Selma. That doesn't seem super efficient when they have what is at least close to a neighborhood school that is within a couple minutes driving or bus service versus what is potentially a 10 to 20-minute bus drive, depending on what traffic's doing in the morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, the numbers at Selma played into that as well. I mean, when we just talked about Rolling Meadows and pulling students from Rolling Meadows to go into Selma, but we also need to, we don't pull enough from Rolling Meadows to adequately fill Selma. And so, again, with Coronado being as low enrollment as it is, I think it was 170-something students who actually live in that zone, if you take out the program that's there, the dual language program. So that was the thought process behind filling those students into Selma as well. So,
Well, in addition, when we had spoke to Coronado, one of the things that you said was we wanted to limit the amount of students that were busing across that corridor.
Yeah.
Now, let me be clear, we're going to do that for the eternity of Judson ISD, because the students who go to Kitty Hawk now go to Veterans, and they got to cross that corridor. The dual language kids that we were bringing up to Coronado, we're taking them up to Selma across the corridor. So we're going to have to make that cross. What we wanted to do in terms of responsiveness to the feedback that we were receiving in the Growth and Planning Committee is that there was a recommendation made then that we could relocate the staff, the students, the dual credit program, and the dual language program. I'm so sorry. The dual language, I'm secondary.
Yeah.
The dual language program, and we could relocate those students, because what we were going to do was separate them between Olympia and Ed Franz,
Right.
and that wasn't well received. So we were thinking we could just bus all of them, and then that was much more. It was. They wanted to stay together. They wanted to stay together.
Okay, so that was more based off Coronado Village staff and parents wanting to keep the school as a whole together
And that's
versus
right.
other kind, okay, because
And having the capacity at the new school to be able to do that.
Dr.
So-
Fields, we also discussed at Growth and Planning that to make it a little bit more palatable for families who, like you said, maybe are really close to Olympia or Ed Franz, those are innovative campuses. We also have school of choice. So we had talked to a couple of families about, that's always an option.
Right.
Now, of course, you have to provide your own transportation school of choice, but just to kind of give options as to, you're not pigeonholed here, there are other opportunities. But most families and the staff were like, we are a close-knit community, it makes more sense to just take us all and put us here.
what about that versus grandfathering that attendance zone out? What about new families who move in? I mean, I can understand people want to stay in, similar to, like Wortham, and allowing those kids to stay with that program through when they're done.
That's not difficult. I mean,
What about
we've done
grandfather? So
in
that
the
when new
past.
people, because if I go move in on Quail Drive today and I'm not tied to anybody, and you tell me I'm zoned for Olympia, it doesn't make a hill of beans a difference to me. And I get that people who are already there, it makes a difference to them. But as we move forward, do we continue to have an egg in the middle in perpetuity? I get trying to keep the families and staff of the current people, those are always considerations we have to think about. But do we want to continue to perpetuate that for people who haven't even moved there yet? I don't
My
know.
only concern would be that once we do that, and once we buy on, I'm looking at our transportation director. What I'm thinking is that once you grandfather the next 5 years of students to go to Selma Elementary, but we say the new students that come in will then get transported over to Olympia or Ed Franz, because they'll be outside of that window, or hazardous route, because crossing 1604 is a hazardous route. Crossing Pat Booker is a hazardous route. So then what'll happen is we'll have 2 buses going in there, one picking up students at one house, taking them over to Selma, and then the student at the next house taking them either to Ed Franz or Olympia, where we could have just all of them go to the new school Selma.
And Dr. Fields, I think we did that with the opening of Veterans, where we had that scenario going on. 'Cause
And it was a lot. We had to have A and B buses. Buses would pull in, and students from the same household would get on going to one particular area, and then another one would be going to Judson, the other one would be going to Veterans. And it was just a lot to put on the transportation department.
Yeah, no, I know. Every time they open new high schools, up in Comal, it's the same thing. It's always
Right.
that kind of rolling start type thing. So it just doesn't seem like a super sustainable map. I'm thinking 10 years out. It'd be nice if that was somehow,
We could come back and
Integrate, I don't
readdress.
know.
Well, I mean, we're
I don't
going
know.
to make a recommendation tonight, where we're moving an entire elementary campus from one middle school to another middle school. And those elementary campuses have been in existence for decades. So it's not like we can't readdress this as we move forward, but right now, the recommendation is to move all those students from Coronado into Selma.
while we're talking about I-35, because it's not on your slide, though, can we talk about the other pocket that's on the other side of 35?
That's the sliver, we're gonna come back.
Oh, we're going to come back
Yes,
to
ma'am.
Olympia?
We
Okay,
are.
never mind.
We
I'm
are.
going to hold my thoughts
Yes,
then.
ma'am. Go ahead.
So Ms. Ryan spoke about the dual language, and that was a recommendation as well, is to move dual language to Selma Elementary School. The Spanish Immersion program that's been talked about quite extensively here tonight will be sunsetted now at Wortham Oaks, meaning the recommendation is to sunset Spanish Immersion at Wortham Oaks. They'll finish out who are currently there, but with no new students starting the program. That is the recommendation. So go ahead.
Okay, so on the Spanish immersion, we definitely had some feedback from the community on that. So could you explain just our thinking as to why we're sunsetting it? One comment was that the attendance is growing in the lower grades. Is that accurate?
I would ask that Dr. Saunders speak to
Yes,
it,
sir.
and Dr. Toppin. I would ask you to emphasize what it is that we look at in programs
sir.
for sustainability
Yeah.
as we move forward as well.
Yes, sir. You guys help me out if I forget any pieces. So remember, Spanish Immersion is a program that you apply and qualify for. So it's a 2-part deal based on their CLI, kindergarten CLI end-of-year data. CLI is their testing, their screener testing. So based on how well they score on that end-of-year screener data, we'll then open up the application process. Really, when we're talking about programs, and there was a parent who spoke to this about starting off with a small number to get the program going, the goal is for that number to be 21, 22 students, just like we would have in a traditional classroom with that student-to-teacher ratio. Right now, currently, we have 18 students that are in the first grade class and 18 students that are in the second grade class. Third, fourth, and fifth grade, that's a little bit of post-COVID stuff. Those classes remained smaller to begin with to get the program going. We want to make sure that we are talking about there is attrition associated with this as well. So what I mean by that is students leaving the program, that's a highly mobile area because of military and so forth. So students leaving the program, we want to make sure that we're reaching that optimal number of students so that it makes it feasible to have a full-time teacher in that position. So that's kind of the space we're in right now. The question we talked about in cabinet is, can we foresee how many kids would possibly qualify at the end of their kinder year going into first grade? And unfortunately, we cannot. There is such a huge amount of growth that takes place in kinder, from that BOY to MOY screener and MOY to EOY screener, that it's really hard to kind of predict, okay, how many kids would qualify? And just if you qualify does not mean that your family necessarily sees the desire to move you into a Spanish immersion program. Because as a reminder, this is an enrichment program. It's not something that's required by TEA. It's something that we did offer to see if there was a want and a desire. And based on the numbers that we saw, we talked about, efficiencies and really making sure that we are using those full-time positions, those FTEs, in the most appropriate way possible. Did I forget anything?
I don't think so.
I think you maybe forgot about the challenge of finding fully bilingual teachers
Correct.
Thank you.
to teach the program.
Yes.
And I'm just looking for the feedback from the cabinet on sustainability.
Yeah.
When we look at a program over the course of 3 years, is there a line of demarcation that we say this is feasible or not? Because if this is something that we can do going forward, there's no reason to sunset it.
Well, if I may add.
Yes, ma'am.
We recently started a program at one of our campuses that we sunsetted after 3 years because of the feedback that we were receiving. So traditionally, at least for the time that I have been here, if after 3 years a program is not working, and that is what that's our target as well through the innovation department, is if we're trying something new, we don't get the enrollment numbers, which is one of the goals of any new program, is to increase the enrollment at any campus, then that's something that we need to reconsider. When we take a look at 1st through 5th grade, a total of 80 students for 5 teachers, when you look at the return on investment, financially, it doesn't seem feasible. When we started that program for the upper grade levels that now currently have 10, 11, or 13 students.
Correct.
That program began with 17 students. So when you see that type of attrition, you're talking about losing about a third of the class. That is a high attrition rate.
Once
So-
the students attrit, can you bring in other students in the middle of the program, or do they have to start in the beginning?
Not for Spanish immersion, it's not recommended, because if you're learning English, your students now in 3rd and 4th grade would have missed out on all of that instruction. Unless they're fluent Spanish speakers, when you're talking about that side of the district, you don't have many fluent Spanish speakers. I will also remind you that several years prior to Spanish immersion, there used to be dual language there as well, which was also sunsetted because there was not enough population to make that program. So
And just as another piece as well, if you asked, can a student enter the program?
Correct.
They can if they have also been in a Spanish immersion class.
But the likelihood of that?
Correct. Out of the 80 students that we have now, there is only one that has moved from Northeast Spanish immersion to Judson Spanish immersion.
Understood.
And that's a employee's child. It's not someone who actually lives in Wortham Oaks.
My concern is that earlier, the statement of whether or not we feel that this is a quality program, that there would have never been a attempt to implement it if we didn't think that this was a quality program that could be used in the district. But if we find that even in its implementation, that we can't support it with the students that are electing it, that's not the role of the administration, not to say, hey, the return on investment here just isn't what we thought it was going to be.
Could where it is have anything to do with it? I mean, has there been any consideration in placing it in a different area of the district?
I would tell you this, Ms. Stanford, in my personal opinion, I think it's in the best place that it could be. Because I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, we also did have Spanish immersion at Mary
Lou Hartman.
Hartman.
and it sunset there because of very low enrollment in that area.
There was also, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
there was also you go.
Everybody knows dual language is and Spanish immersion, all that is my jam, because my daughter was in the first kindergarten dual language class, 2A dual language at Wortham Oaks. And when that got sunset, There were a lot of phone calls to a superintendent, and I thought Ms. Richardson and I were not going to be friends anymore, type thing, because I thought it was the end of the world, right? And then it transitioned, and luckily Judson allowed our kids to grandfather out, and they all graduated 5th grade last year, but down to a cohort of 9 by the time they exited the program. We started with 24. And so I'm sure all the Wortham parents are at home watching the video right now. You probably only know Spanish Immersion. You don't know two-way dual language. And the different thoughts on how we create these programs within education has bounced back and forth over the last 10 years. There's been lots of trends, one-way, two-way, Spanish immersion, and all of those types of things. And we're finally seeing some movement within San Antonio where certain programs are getting more elevated because of some of the successes they have had. So two-way dual language, if we go look at NEISD and SAISD, and some of those are coming out as like the premier programs. But what a lot of those districts have found is they don't work as well in isolation on one campus because of the attrition problem. If you have one class of 22 kids, when they start, kids move away and come and go, and they attrit out. So what most of those districts have attempted to do is to try to cluster those programs so that if you're pulling from, let's say, the northern feeder pattern and having one school where all of those dual language kids go, and you've now got 3, 4 in each grade, as kids attrit out, it's easier to go from 3 classes to 2 versus getting rid of the program. And so, you know, and we've talked a lot about this program and how I hope that maybe doing this at Selma and growing this program as a model and drawing parents back in who want this type of program, because I'll tell you, exposure to native Spanish speakers as part of a two-way dual language is phenomenal. The cultural things that you get as being part of a program like that, that's why things like Mark Twain and Irving are so successful from a cultural standpoint on top of a language standpoint. So that if we can start working what that model looks like, then in our other feeder patterns, creating and are more robust, because we have it going on in a number of our schools. I just think we have a lot of growth that we could do to make our programs as robust as some of our surrounding districts. And I think Selma can be a step in that direction to merge these programs all together and create something that is culturally aware, language rich, and let's get these kids their seals of biliteracy and everything else they can through this program. And I know I would have driven for dual language. If it hadn't been at Wortham and it had been somewhere else, I would have been driving my kid for 5 years over there because it was that amazing of a program. So I hope that people from all, whether it's Wortham and you've got a kindergartner now, I hope you will get in your car and you will drive to Selma Elementary because that program is going to be worth driving there for and getting into it.
Mr. Macias?
Thank you. One of the speakers today had mentioned the possibility of paying a fee for the program. And so I know that we probably haven't really looked at that possibility, but it's not uncommon. Back in 2011, we had people pay to use the bus if they didn't live within the 2 miles. And so it had some benefit, so it's not like a foreign practice. But I kind of can agree with the idea that maybe a reduction, and the only reason I even say that is because if the 1st and 2nd grade are at capacity, that shows me that there's interest. The other thing that comes to mind is Mr. Hernandez, when he was principal of Judson High School, came and he brought all his IB kids, so we wouldn't sunset IB, with the expectation that we would see an increase in IB. We allowed him to go forward, but it did not produce the results. I'm not saying this would happen now, but the same premise of trying to be responsive to community needs. I think the thing that's important here to note is that we have different types of learners. And as we as a district are looking to support student development, having different opportunities. And so the cost isn't difficult. we would just see a phase down of the program, only because we have first and second grade. I mean, if we didn't have enrollment there, I would be like, no. But we can drop down to one class maybe. I mean,
That's all we have now.
That's all we have class.
So we have one, and we have, how many, Dr. Saunders?
18 in first grade, 18 in second
Well,
grade,
but for the third and fourth, that's where the problem is, right?
11 and 13.
Well, the problem.
They started at 18. So the current third and fourth grade did start at full capacity. So
Well-
the attrition rate over the years
Sure.
is showing that.
Well, I would say that in being responsive to the community, to look at the possibility of giving it that one more year. What we also empowered Mr. Hernandez to do back then was to have his parents promote the program. If they want the program to be viable, they have to take a step into helping the viability of that program. So we could make sort of this arrangement with the parents in the program. So we have an option to charge a little bit. We have an option to say we'll continue it one more year, but we got to see increased enrollment or sustainability. It's one class, and for us to offer it, I think speaks to us working with students who have a vested interest in
But
learning.
to Ms. Ryan's point, you make a good point, Ms. Ryan. We attempted that at the first attempt. We wanted to move Spanish immersion to Selma. But the immediate feedback we got from the parents that were involved in the program, if it's not here at Wortham Oaks, then we just won't come at all. Well, we can't be subject to dictation of where it's got to be. We're trying to cultivate a program, to your point. If we had dual language at Selma, then we had Spanish immersion, we were on our way to starting that, you know.
And I agree. I think we lose sight when you, and only because I've looked at all the maps, right? So I look at all the lines and I've looked at everything, and there are so many kids that are going to move with this plan. It's not just the JSTEM kids. It's not just the Wortham kids. It's not just the Coronado kids. It's the Metzger kids who are in 7th grade right now that are going to be going to Kirby for 8th grade. You know, they're going to be, like, everyone's going to be impacted. And so I think there are pockets that are more visible because their name ends up on a slide, right? Like, move JSTEM. So everybody sees JSTEM, but there's a lot of other groups of kids who are also going to have to move. There's kids in masters that have been there pre-K through 4th. They're going to have to move for 5th grade unless their parents are able to drive them, which, you know, elementary hours, good luck with that if you can get off work at 3 in the afternoon, or adventure club at over. So, I mean, I think I don't think it's about looking at any specific programs feeling like they're going to have to move. I think we need to consider in the totality the potentially thousands of kids who are all going to be impacted in the exact same way. They are going to leave their teachers, they're going to leave their school, they're going to have to get on a different bus and different feeder, and I guess come up with ways that we're going to try to ease that transition. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
You know, like I saw, like any ISD is going to do meet the teacher just for the kids who are transfers. So like Candlewood's should have a meet the teacher just for the kids that came over from masters type thing. That was the example that like any ISD had given about just being overly accommodating of how impactful this is going to be socially and emotionally, like on some of these kids having to transition, and what can we do in that, what they can do in that process. And so I'm sure those thoughts are already in everybody's brain. I'm looking at you all, you're like, yeah, all right, got that written down,
We're
type
just
thing.
waiting, once we make the decision.
Correct, and those are the things that don't get articulated to parents, you know, right away off the bat. These are things that the cabinet's working on in the background of how all these kind of cool things you can do. But I think there's a lot of lines moving, so I don't want to lose that.
To Mr. Macias's point, when you said it's the 3rd or the 4th and 5th grade that the issue is, they started at capacity as well. But through attrition, we find ourselves with 13 or however many students.
And we saw the exact
13, 11, and 9 in third,
13,
fourth.
11, and 9.
And dual language saw the exact same attrition when it was dual language there too. Again, Aaron's class was down to 9, and actually it might have really been closer to 7. So if you think about if I wanted to keep that program open and pay, well, and there should be 21 kids in a class, and now there's 7, so
The
are
amount of money,
us
it
7
would be
parents
too
going to pay
expensive.
2/3 of a
It would be
teacher's
too
salary?
expensive.
Like, that would be awfully high tuition, you know, I might pay it, it was a pretty awesome program. But that's a pretty high tuition cost too, when, and so I think we have now, I guess it was 6 years in the program, you know, 6 years of attrition numbers between the two programs to see what it's done by not centralizing multiple schools into one program, you know, kind of location. So I know it's hard for families. I do love the programs.
I still had one more question.
Yes, sir.
And the question is, we treat our electives in secondary. If they don't make, we don't offer the class.
Correct.
Why wouldn't we, or could we not take that same approach with Spanish immersion? If it doesn't make in third, then we don't offer the class. And again, just asking the question.
I can tell you, Mr. Macias, that this isn't new for us. We were the ones that came back and said, hey, Converse, the year round, we're not seeing the return on investment that we should. And when we talked about the amount of money that we were putting into the program versus what we were seeing, we made that recommendation, and we're doing the same thing now. So if the board collectively says, no, let's keep this going, we stand ready to continue to implement. But if you're tasking us with fiscal responsibility, this is the responsible recommendation to make. Yes, what were you going to say, ma'am?
Sorry, we experienced the same thing with IB at Judson.
IB at Judson as
Extremely low
well.
enrollment numbers for what we were paying for the licensing fee for the program and for the teachers that were only teaching about
2 students.
2, 3, or 4 students.
Well, I certainly wouldn't want you to do that, but obviously the summer program and the Spanish immersion are on 2 different levels in terms of cost. We said earlier that we wouldn't lose professionals. Teachers would be offered other positions in dual language or in bilingual, so no one's losing their job.
Oh, no, sir.
But again, just trying to offer a broader menu for higher achieving students to attract them here, because they're just, again, we're in a world where there's a lot of choice. And so that's just the only pause. I mean, we'll move forward. I'll go with my board's majority on this one.
Yes, sir.
But bottom line, I just want to make sure those questions are asked and that there's a reply to those questions.
Yes, sir. So I guess we were on the elementary recommendations. Can we move to that?
So these are additional elementary recommendations. There's a pocket of schools that are having some students move out of one attendance zone into a new attendance zone, and so I wanted to show that on the map, starting with Copperfield, some students going to Converse. Hopefully, it's going to work.
It's going to work.
Boom. Nope.
That's it, right? No?
No, it was a snippet that we had. There's some type of technical difficulty. So
It's that
Yeah.
little triangle right there.
it's that little, if you go, yeah, this little triangle area, does this work?
That's it.
Right
And it
there?
currently goes to Copperfield, but this map shows it going to Converse.
It's going to go to Converse. They currently attend the purple area, which is Copperfield. This little sliver is going to be moving into Converse. So that's one of the elementary, and I think that's roughly about 95 students that are going to be moving out of the Copperfield attendance zone into the Converse attendance zone.
How many students in that area?
95.
95?
95. Yes, sir.
Again, these are all recommendations. As soon as the board says, yes, we can run, we are going to start calling people in, having meetings, doing the whole thing. Yes, sir.
And that area is closer to Converse Elementary
Yes,
than it is to Copperfield,
Yes.
right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then the next one, Escondido Elementary School to Elof. Again, we'll try it, but we may have to still go back to the interactive map. So if you look at that.
Can you use
So
your
this-
cursor, Savine? Just point
Yes,
it out
sir.
with your cursor. There you go.
So this gray area is Elof's area, and this pink area is Escondido. And so
But currently,
currently if you scroll back
from
up,
Walsall,
you go back up. Walsham is there. So everything below Walsham was attending Escondido. Now, everything below Walsham is going to be into the ELOF attendance zone. Now, that's roughly 245 students, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all 245 of those students are going to that, because we have school of choice that are going to other schools. So I'm not saying all 245 are going to ELOF, it's just that 245 students reside in that area. Make sense?
Mr. Neuer?
Yes, sir.
So obviously, that's an area that I think Escondido is pretty full, and so this will help bring down some of those numbers at Escondido.
Absolutely.
And ELOF does have capacity to incorporate that.
I actually went and met with ELOF, the campus. We talked to them, I actually talked to both of these campuses actually this week. Met with Mr. Wilson, and he's fully aware and actually welcomes it as a positive thing for his campus, that he will be receiving more students onto his campus because of the capacity.
Well, my question is then that, obviously you mentioned there was school of choice. So just for the audience to know, is it still, 75% or 85%? What's the percentage of allowing students that live outside the line to go to the campus if it's available? We cut it off at a certain percentage, right?
I don't know if it's percentage or if we just reach the tilting point where we can't handle them there,
Yeah,
but Dr. Goss?
it's typically not based on a percentage, it's based on the campus capacity in terms of classroom space. So this past year, we did not close any campuses to school of choice, and it did increase the numbers at some of the campuses. Escondido was one of those that received a lot of extra students because we did not, typically during the registration process, what we do is we watch classroom numbers for the students that live in the area, and when we get close to the capacity of that, where we know we might have to begin to turn students away, then we start to shut down for school of choice.
So there is a number, right?
There is a number. There is a number. It's not a percentage, but it is a number based on classroom space, teachers, and so on at that campus site. One thing that we are looking at this year is we know that even with some of these changes, some of those campuses will already be close to or at capacity. And so there may be a need to close some of these campuses before we get to registration in terms of school of choice.
But we are going to invite them to go somewhere. I really don't want to find
If they
ourselves
request
in
a
a
school of choice, we would
situation.
absolutely invite them to the other schools that we have available. Just simply want to say we may not have every single campus in the district available for school of choice. An example of that might be Wortham Oaks Elementary, who is already
Correct.
quite full. That is one of those campuses that may not necessarily be open to school of choice, but we certainly would recommend that students potentially apply to either Rolling Meadows or Selma Elementary in that specific capacity, especially in that particular area.
And obviously, the rationale was that we opened our borders some years ago, and we got an influx of students who didn't live in the district. So the priority is still taxpayers, correct?
Yes, so the priority is taxpayers, especially for school of choice, and we do request applications for school of choice first, and we offer that to in-district and boundary folks that live within the Judson boundary. The out-of-district applications, they open later in the year, and we do limit new applications so that we are sure that we can accommodate those students.
Okay,
Thank you. All right, Mr. Oh,
I had a school of choice question, so this might be the appropriate time since
Yes,
we're
ma'am.
talking about that already, because, Escondido's the example of, I think the numbers you had given were
300.
300 school of choice plus 64 out of districts.
yes, ma'am.
And it's
I
like,
think it was more than
It's
that.
around, no, it's between 250 and 300 when you combine out-of-district
Combine
and
them
school
together,
choice.
okay.
When you combine them together.
either way, we created a busting at the seam school, kind of self-inflicted. We kind of did this, to ourselves by letting everybody, kind of in. So I guess, what policies are we looking at putting in place for going forward with some of these plans? So in terms of, let's say, existing people, right, versus new. We'll talk about new in a second, but existing, if we have families already in the schools and they're doing well, obviously not issues, not uninvited back, type thing, are they going to be allowed, obviously at the undercapacity schools? So let's say I am an out of a district, my kids in the dual language at Coronado Village, right? Is my out-of-district acceptance into the dual language when it's at Selma, that's we're not looking at any policies that would stop that, because we don't think that is going to be busting at the seams.
Not at all.
Right?
Correct.
What about like existing Escondido people?
I can
as an
give you
example?
2 examples. One, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. One is Copperfield. We're moving some students out of Copperfield back to Converse because it's closer to Converse than it is to Copperfield, which will then open up space for Copperfield. Escondido's a good example as well, because we have so many, it was really a perfect storm. We went to year-round at Coronado, a bunch of, at Converse.
There's too many schools.
I know. We went to year-round at Converse, and a lot of parents opted out and went to Escondido because they didn't want the year-round. In addition, at both of those campuses, along 1604 on the other side, those students are zoned for East Central. To get to an East Central school from that area takes about, 45 minutes on a bus? So you can see Copperfield from their house, they want to go there. Same with Escondido if you go down 1516. So if we have the capacity at those campuses, we want to bring those students in, because we want to invite as many students as we can into the district, But to your point, if you're not maintaining attendance, grades, and discipline, then we're going to invite you to go back where you're supposed to go. But if we can create space at those campuses, we want to use it. Now, once she gets to the point that she's getting calls saying, hey, from the principals, I'm full at 4th grade, or I'm full at 5th grade, or we can't even compensate or house the parents that are moving in the neighborhood, then that's when we're going to say, we invite you to go.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about, allowing too many, and then all of a sudden, all the late registers who are like, oh, I forgot to register my kid, I've been that parent sometimes too, come rolling in, and all of a sudden, 4th grade's capped. Well,
She's been pretty good at kind of seeing that before it happens and then redirecting people before we get to
Correct.
that point.
And I do want to add one point of clarification to that, because it is part of our policy. Yes, students for school of choice do need to maintain grades, attendance, and so on. We do have the ability, and we have not invoked this in the past, to request students to attend another campus should overcrowding become an issue, especially if you are an out-of-district or a school of choice student. We have chosen not to do that because we want our students to stay at the campus that they are happy with. But that is a part of the district policy related to it, even though it is not a first choice for us in terms of making those adjustments and asking them to go to a different location.
yeah, because I'm also worried we redraw these lines and nothing changes, because everyone's just going to keep going where they've been going, because we have school of choice too. So what's going to make Escondido go down? You can redraw some lines and tell them they're now Elof, and tell them that they're, I forgot who's to the west, Woodlake? No.
No, Elof.
No, who's the other
Escondido.
side of Escondido? We're cutting something off. Master. No?
Masters.
That's fine. But if they all decide to just all come back, are we still going to be at 850 or 900 people at Escondido? So, like, who's going to have the priority? Like, how are you going to rack and stack those those applications
Well,
to try and get them down to a manageable number next year?
Bad example. I don't want to steal Mr. Brooks's thunder, but as we went through that with the transportation department, that piece that's in Candlewood, that was supposed to go to Masters, we were sending back, that was done before. So now those students have been going to Candlewood. They don't go to Masters.
Oh, our map's
So,
too strong?
The map was.
Okay. It
So,
happens.
well, it was the map that we had given
Okay.
Mr. Templeton, but when we talked to transportation, they've been transporting those students to Candlewood.
Okay.
So that's a change that would not have to happen. It's
Okay.
already in play.
Okay. Yeah, but I was just saying, of all the changes that we're making, trying to stabilize some of these numbers, if people don't choose to go and choose to stay, prioritizing, how are we going to prioritize those applications,
That's going to be on Dr. Goss to monitor the the enrollment and make
Correct.
sure that we have the capacity.
Yes, the school of choice process going forward, that's why I stated earlier, the school of choice process going forward this next year might look different. There may be caps on campuses that we are not taking school of choice students. And so if there is a cap, even after we move the boundary lines, if there's a cap on a particular student, on a particular campus, that they cannot take school of choice, then for those students that might have wanted to go back to those campuses, we would then make suggestions for other locations for them to attend that are open. Because we are looking to try to balance out these campus numbers. And we would definitely work on a plan, as you stated earlier, that helps to work with the families and iron out those details once we know where these lines fall and we have a better feel for what those numbers are going to look like going forward.
Okay, yeah, and I think as, transparent as we can be on what those look like, whether that's a dashboard that shows all of our campuses and who's red, yellow, and green, type thing that, hey, listen, capped, don't even bother, type thing, and maybe, maybe visually seeing what statuses are as people go to enroll in the district, enroll what they have, and it may even attract other people who are looking at our district too and be like, oh, look it, they've got openings and, they're great at this place, they're green. It looks like I can, apply and go within, maybe that's something digitally that could be tracked to do that. But yeah, I know.
Could we do that? What would be involved in that?
Again, we can sit down and see if we can come up with something and come back to the board.
That would
I don't want to just hear the recommendation and say, yes, we can get that. I mean,
Right.
let us look
Yes.
into it and then we'll get back with the
Yeah,
board.
if that's something feasible for all the wonderful techie people I met a couple weeks ago in the back
Yes, ma'am.
hallways who are way smarter than we are, to make some sort of dashboard like that. But yeah, okay, I think they were just, some of the undercapacity, even school of choice and out of district families were worried how some of this would affect them. And I know the problem areas, but I would like to assure the people who are not currently in identified problem areas are, most likely to be allowed to return if they meet, all of the other criteria that we
A
have
lot of
set.
the recommendations that we're making are so, they make sense that I do see a lot of people saying, wow, now I get to go to the school across the street and not have to catch a bus all the way to Escondido.
Yeah. But if you're at Olympia, we still have room at Olympia. We're still have room at Rolling Meadows. We're going to have room at Selma. We're, we've got room at all of these schools.
If they want to choose to
that-
go there, they can.
That they can come back. They're welcome and they can bring their friends and, type things until we don't. And then we'll let people know when we're not okay at certain campuses anymore. So,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, that was all I had on school of choice.
Last one is going to be the area over at Olympia, Mr. Brooks.
Yes, sir. Here you go, Ms. Ryan. This particular section was, we were going to recommend, or we're recommending that little sliver of students there under 35 that used to attend Olympia would go to Selma. But after meeting with transportation, after meeting with cabinet, looking at the number of students and feedback mostly from the community, we would make an amendment to this recommendation to leave those students there, and it's about 45 students.
Total, high school, middle school, and.
45 total students.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just leave them.
It's 45, I'm sorry, 45 elementary students.
And they're free to do that.
45 elementary students. Yeah.
So that's my neighborhood. That's where I live. Oh, yeah, that goes way back. That goes all the way back to the golf course at Olympia.
Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
we're encroaching on Universal City there. But it is actually Selma. That's not a high number of people, and because of the location of the new school, it'll be very easy for parents to collaborate on transporting should they want to go to the new school.
Yes,
Okay.
And I know Olympia wants to keep those kids.
correct.
So moving on to the middle school recommendation overview. One of the highlights is that Dr. Fields spoke about feeder patterns. Currently, Candlewood Elementary School feeds into Metzger, and so the recommendation is to change that feeder pattern to move it, Candlewood moving into Kirby Middle School, and that would provide a transition of the STEM program or the STEM school for Candlewood moving into the new Kirby STEM. And so that's the recommendation we're making. Park Village Elementary School, currently feeds into Kirby Middle School, and so there was a recommendation to move that school, Park Village, into the Woodlake Hills Middle School feeder pattern, and that falls in line with the desire to keep the high school, because this move would allow Judson High School to remain at a higher enrollment level, given that it has the highest capacity for students than the other high schools. There was a projection forecasted by Mr. Templeton that over the next, if left unchecked, over the next 5 to 7 years, Wagner was going to overtake Judson High School enrollment-wise. And having been at Wagner myself, Wagner, as I stated earlier, has a capacity for about 2,000 to 2,400 students. Getting higher than that just isn't safe at Wagner High School. And so making this move would allow relief from Wagner and students to be moved into Judson High School.
And in terms of the Candlewood Metzger to Kirby, it would decrease because Metzger currently,
correct.
If you take out the JSTEM students from Judson Middle, then it's the second largest middle school in the district with about
Behind Kitty Hawk.
with a projection over the next few years, if left unchecked, it was going to go up to what, 1,300 students?
1,300.
So
Yes,
this will give us an opportunity to bring those down, send them over to Woodlake where they have the capacity.
Correct. And then finally, the recommendation to move JSTEM to Kitty Hawk Middle School. Questions?
Yes, ma'am.
So the middle school is probably the more complicated portion of this. And, you know, I would say the hardest part for me being on a board is the responsibility to the taxpayers of Judson ISD, because I know I talk to parents a lot, I talk to staff a lot, and students and all of that stuff too, but the majority of the people in our area are community members and taxpayers who don't have any children and aren't associated with Judson other than maybe being alumni. So in the statement that the committee did not recommend closing a middle school is a little bit of a misnomer, because at the October meeting, this middle school capacity was discussed. And there were a lot of questions from the committee when Mr. Templeton started to put up the capacity numbers and then the projections for the middle school, because we're losing hundreds and hundreds of students a year, and it's between that 5th and 6th grade level. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of them are going and choosing charter schools, homeschools, wherever they're going, and they're not choosing Judson's for middle school. So when you see very stagnant growth at the middle school level, and that's without vouchers, that's very concerning. So when I went back and watched that October meeting I wanted to see exactly what the discussion was. And what Dr. Fields had stated to the committee in that meeting is, you want a school capacity to be at 80 to 90%. And that lines up with what this board approved as our balanced scorecard.
That's our goal, yes, ma'am.
Correct, 80 to 90%. And then Mr. Templeton had chimed in also. He said, yeah, 85% is optimal, is the word he used. Don't go above 93% because you need a 5 to 7% capacity buffer. Makes complete sense, right? Because you want to have your Eagle Buck store. So if you keep 10 to 15% of your classrooms empty, that gives you room for a teacher lounge, an art room, all these things. That could be classrooms if you really needed them to be, but you don't want to force a school into making every single room a classroom. So, you know, the committee heard comments like that we're trying to get to, 85% to be optimal, and then Dr. Fields talked about it tonight also, and talked about it to the committee about how Judson Middle School is not built to be a middle school campus. It never was. It's a 9th and 10th grade academic building. Everybody was supposed to walk back to the regular campus to do all of those things. And I've seen the facilities state at Judson Middle School. It's not, some things weather well with age and other facilities don't. And that's what's facing a lot of school districts around us. And so if you haven't watched any ISD's meeting from Monday night, great discussion from their committee and their board members too. And this also came up at the TASB conference we went to. A lot of the sessions were about aging facilities and continuing to put money into aging facilities. And at what point does their net value get to a point where your maintenance costs are going to overrun? And that's why if you look at the schools that some other districts are now looking at closing, they're the older schools with low net value that are going to need tons of upgrades. So when I hear, I'm going to get voted out. My kid goes to Judson Middle School, so I'm going to get voted off the island probably tonight. And this is the first time I'm saying the words Judson Middle School. Those words actually didn't, that specific school did not come up in necessarily as a recommendation in the meetings, but
It did.
when we look
Specifically.
at,
It was specifically named.
okay, we look at 50, and all the committee members kept asking, why is one of the plans not consolidating the middle schools? Because according to Mr. Templeton's numbers, we're gonna be down to 59% capacity. Like 59%, that's taxpayer money. Now on the elementary side, we're gonna, it looks like the way we're trending is we're gonna open a school, but we're gonna close the school, right? Net sum game. Well, we still got one principal, we still got, 5 custodians, whatever it is, the costs, we're just gonna trade the costs here for the costs over here. But now we're gonna open another middle school when we already have enough seats at our current ones. And that means there is no cost gain. There is no cost benefit. So I'm trying to figure out how are we gonna pay to open a 6th middle school? And I think the numbers you threw out were 8.2 million. It was like 7.5 last year, and I think the most recent one you said was something like 8.2 million for a 6th school that will then bring us down to 59% capacity. And, one of the concerns brought up at NEISD's committee was about rearranging kids, and that rearranging kids doesn't make your operation more efficient. In fact, it can lead to worse efficiencies, right? And the whole system becomes less efficient. So why was that never at least presented to the committee, since they were questioning capacities and why the capacities were going to be so low and have another middle school? And how, in this huge deficit budget, are we going to add potentially an $8.2 million bill when we already have enough seats for middle schoolers? I guess I don't understand. Not that the board would go that direction, I just don't understand why it's not an option we are analyzing on the table and socializing with the community to see what the pros and cons would be and how much money we could save on a cost per student basis. I don't know why it's not on the table.
There's several different ways I want to answer that, but I remember it differently, so I'm going to allow the cabinet to give some feedback, and I want to hear what they have to say, because I remember specifically someone asking the question about Judson Middle. In addition, I also reiterated that if you can't put, and I know people remember this, you can't put that many kids in a middle school. And
But
I said
everybody
that-
else does. Just for the record, we talked about those numbers at the last meeting, and if you look at the school districts around us, every single school district's average enrollment at their middle schools is somewhere between 900 to 1,300. So if that's what everybody else is doing, then why do we need ours to be
But
at 700?
that's not what you're calculating. You're calculating 1,700. And the retort we had was you can't put 1,700 kids at a campus. And when we put the capacity on there right now, it reads 1,700, and those are the numbers that you're using for seat space. And I was saying you can't put that many kids at a
Okay,
campus.
so if we went to 5 campuses, that would be 900 students per campus, which would be lower than most of the middle schools around us, and would have us still at less than 80% capacity of the 5 schools. If we just closed one of our middle schools, I don't even care, pick one, whichever one you want. If we closed them, we would still be below 80% capacity, because our enrollment is only projected to be 4,500 for middle schools. And that doesn't even include
That's with
vouchers.
1,700 seats.
No, that's
at that.
900 times 5 is 4,500, if I'm doing math right? 9 times 5? 45? 4,500 students divided by 5 middle schools, not 6, would be 900 students per campus. Smaller than pretty much every NEISD school is. So why couldn't we do 900 per campus? Is a
Does that
reason
include
that's not.
JSTEM? Does that include JSTEM?
Yep, that includes the JSTEM students are
I
in
don't
that
think so. When we
4,500.
calculate those numbers, it's typically not JSTEM included because it's on a different line underneath, correct? The JSTEM students are on a different line. We just read it today.
400.
Yes, but he's got them now in the
Those 400 students
new
aren't
slides.
calculated in the middle school numbers.
Right, they're on their own line
Right.
in the secondary level.
Correct, but in his projections for Kitty Hawk, in his plan, he has the JSTEM kids in there when he has new attendance zone ones that you briefed to us. And you have it at about 4,500-ish, Mr. Templeton? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I
So,
memorized all of your slides.
Understood. I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
I just want the board to understand that right now, the lines of demarcation are 2 middle schools for each high school. If we combine all the students and put them into the 5 middle schools, then what we will do is move those lines of demarcation where you will go to the same middle school, but then you will separate as you go out into the high schools.
And we have that happen a lot anyway, because so many of our kids CTE path to a school other than our kids don't stay together. Yeah, JSTEMers, you've got kids moving to different CTE paths, so
Those are typically
those are a lot of kids who
programmatic,
don't
though.
follow their feeder
When
patterns.
But when kids grow up from K through 8 and they stay together, then they typically look like they're going to go to high school together.
Yeah, then they can school choice CTE over.
These are all recommendations if the board collectively
Yeah,
says.
this is about fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers. It is, my taxpayers are asking me why we would go down to 59% capacity when other school districts are closing schools based on capacity, facility, age, and those types of things because they read the news too. And then they ask why we're not doing it. And even the Growth and Planning Committee members, the ones that were originally there, are still asking why that wasn't one of the ones on November 6th.
When, Dr. Fields, can I?
Yes, sir, please.
When we presented at the last workshop that we had, I commented, and I want to comment again, that when you talk about middle school and the number of students that you have in a middle school regarding class sizes, the type of students in middle school, that's anywhere. I mean, they're in adolescence. And so we want to make sure that we're not talking strictly numbers when it comes to middle school. In addition, here tonight, we spoke about and just had a long conversation about splitting neighborhoods. And so we're considering the the Kentucky split and moving and taking that group of kids and not taking splitting a neighborhood. If we went with this idea of 5 middle schools, Dr. Fields is correct. At some point, once they head to high school, some neighborhood is going to get split as it relates to attending high school. So to me, my opinion, as a former principal and some of the middle school principals that are here, if we go with the numbers that are being thrown out for middle schools, you're looking at 28, 30 kids in a class in middle school, and that's just
where would you
not, that's just not.
You understand the middle school can hold 1,250 students, and we're talking about putting 900. Class size has nothing to do with campus size. There are enough classrooms at Kitty Hawk Middle School for 1,250 students at a class size of 24 students. We have the educational specs on all these buildings. We know how many
No,
classrooms
easily
there
at
are.
Kitty Hawk, you are correct.
Correct,
I
same
would
with Metzger.
argue that you
Metzger
can't do
also.
1,250 students at Kirby.
No, I'm
You
saying, can
can't.
we do it wouldn't be 1,250. You're never going to fill a
But
school
we're
to 100.
calculating the numbers when we talk about these statistics at 1,250, and I'm letting you know, Kirby can't handle 1,250 students.
Correct,
Nor
like
would I
Mr.
ever
Templeton
recommend
said,
it.
you would never want to fill a school that high. So what's wrong with putting 900 in a school? Because there's 15 principals over in NEISD that are managing that many kids or more. Most of them are all managing more. I guess I just don't understand
We
why
have
our
schools in this
principals
district
can't.
that are managing more than that.
Well, yeah,
If
so-
you go to
and-
Judson Middle right now, there's almost 1,300. We talked about Metzger being a
I've been
larger
very, very
campus.
patient, and Ms. Ryan, you keep interrupting Dr. Fields. Look, I want him to say his full thing, like you get your opportunity.
Okay.
So are you done? So I have
Yes, I just
something
want
to
to
say.
make sure, there was some misinformation put out that there's 20, it would require 28 kids in a class, and that's not true, because those schools at 24 kids in a class would fit more than 900 students.
The fundamental question you asked is what makes us different from any ISD. The difference is our amount of students that are economically disadvantaged, which means we need smaller campuses to address the need, not only academically, but the social-emotional need. So we can't inundate campuses at a capacity that you're talking about for Judson Middle School specifically. It was never designed to be a middle school. It was a high school. So I'm going to treat it like a middle school and not a high school. That's why this argument feels sort of lost, because the consensus of this board has already said, we're going to move forward with the recommendation of administration. But you're trying to make an argument that is not thinking about the students. And the students at Judson
So
Middle
why are
School.
we having this meeting if everyone else has already decided they're going to vote with their
I've
recommendation?
already put it out on social media. I do not want to
I thought it was up to the
Ms. Ryan, I
board.
have the floor, and you keep interrupting me.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So
You've said
bottom
how you're
line,
voting.
I've already stated to my community that we are not going to have 1,700 kids in a campus. We're going to work with what we have. We still have a fluid situation with vouchers, so we may be revisiting this whole scenario again next year. So for the sake of moving forward, I accept the recommendation. I want our students to have the best chance, and right now, smaller campuses are the best chance for our students to get to academic excellence, period. Thank you.
Mr. Salinas, I know you had your hand up a minute ago.
When, when this has happened at Judson before, there was such a thing as grandfathering. I don't understand why, or maybe Dr. Fields can give us numbers. Why can't we grandfather the eighth graders at JSTEM? It's only going to be 1 year, but I'd like to see the cost. And I believe one of them was transportation.
Yes, sir.
If you can give us numbers, then we can bring it back. If I have to put it on an agenda item, I will. Let them have a chance to stay where they are right now, the eighth graders, not sixth or seventh, the eighth graders. And I think that would be much better for them. They would feel better, I think, if they finished on their campus. Thank you.
My only feedback on that, Mr. Salinas, would be, I'd ask that we kind of do a survey of the students, because I don't want to make a decision for the entire eighth grade, when if we were to ask the entire eighth grade, 60 to 70% of them would say, no, I'd rather go to Kitty Hawk. But now we're making a decision because of the vocal ones that came in and made statements. But if 70% of them are saying I'd rather, or 60%, more than 50 are saying I'd rather go, then physically and economically, it would be better to do so. But we can look into it. I'm just saying to the board.
Survey the eighth grade.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say one thing about splitting that. So JSTEM is a campus that is very highly technologically advanced. There are specific labs and specific technologies that are related to JSTEM. So if you were to keep one grade level, you would then need to repurchase all of that equipment and essentially setting up two JSTEMs. You would be setting up one at Kitty Hawk for our 7th and 8th grade and maintain the one at JSTEM rather than moving that equipment. So that is an additional, when you asked what costs might be associated, you said
Thanks.
transportation. Please understand there would be some considerable technology costs associated with that movement
I
as well.
appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask a question about that? Well, how about the Kitty Hawk 7th graders that will be 8th graders next year that have to go to Cibolo Creek? Would we grandfather them in also? Because aren't they in the same situation? Like they've been with their teachers and on their sports teams and their fine arts director for the last 2 years. So should we are we
You
just
make a
going
good
to
point,
open
Ms. Ryan.
Cibolo Creek as a rolling only 6th grade?
Your recommendation is not lost on me. I understand where
Yeah,
you're going.
I just don't want to split groups. I am very sympathetic to JSTAM, obviously, because I have a kid there, but I'm also very sympathetic to the kids that are also in very similar situations, and all the fourth graders, they're going to be fifth graders, who don't have parents who can drive them, who can't school of choice, and that's a reality. There's a small group that can commute and pick their kids up and stuff like that, but there is a huge group that is busy working and can't be driving their kids from one place to another. So I would hate to do for one and not do for the other.
Dr. Fields, if I may, I've been very quiet tonight. I'm going to talk from several different hats. I'm going to talk as a high school principal that launched T-STEM. I'm also going to talk as a parent of a former J-STEM student who's now a junior in college. And I want to talk from the parent standpoint. It wasn't the building that made J-STEM so special for my daughter. It was the relationships she's cultivated with the teachers that were there, and the relationships she's cultivated with the students that were there, and all the experiences they had in that particular environment. Even to this day, we have a holiday event where all the students that went through J-STEM in elementary together and graduated, they all come to my house every year around Christmas time, and they do a sleepover for 2 nights and whatnot. But it's the relationships that were cultivated with the students there. I will say that when I was the receiving principal of the first class of J-STEM students that entered into Wagner High School, one of the things was the idea that they were going to have this specialized area like they had at J-STEM. They were on the 3rd floor, but when they became part of our T-STEM program, it was a school within a school, and it was a comprehensive high school experience, which means we weren't going to have a hallway dedicated just to our T-STEM babies. I will say my daughter thoroughly enjoyed, and her friends thoroughly enjoyed having the comprehensive high school experience in that particular building. But I also know about the unique factors that she experienced at J-STEM with just being relegated to the 3rd floor. They really would like to have the experience like JECA has, where you have your building and you have your classrooms, and it's like this little, for lack of a better word, bubble, where you have just the J-STEM feel of a building and the interactions and making it your own and having that whole experience. And I've talked to many of the teachers at J-STEM. I know some of them by first name because they still try to ask about my daughter when they see me. They want that experience also, I think, for the most part. So what am I saying? I'm saying that if you break up the group, 6 and 7 at one place, 8 at another place, you're going to miss that opportunity for kids to have that experience 6th through 8th grade. Because at J-STEM, it's just not you're a 6th grader, you're a J-STEMer, and you're part of that 6th through 8th family. That's going to be one thing. And then the other thing, to give them an opportunity, because we're not in a position right now to build a new building for J-STEM. But we are in a position where we can dedicate a building that is already on an existing campus and have that feeling, have the kids be able to experience that. Because yes, we did the paint and we put the new floor tile on that 3rd floor and we made it, but in reality, it's about providing an opportunity to have that experience as a campus versus a wing on a floor in a 3-story building. I'll stop.
The only other thing left is the high school recommendation overview.
I'm sorry, I got a lot of questions on Facebook, so I tried to write them all down for people. There's some concerns about how far that Cibolo Creek attendance zone is dragging off to the right, and having 6 elementary schools feeding there. Because some of the math of it is, if I live on Quail Drive, in the former Coronado Village, or the Coronado Village area, to Kitty Hawk is 0.9 miles, 4 minutes away. Cibolo Creek is what, 28 minutes without traffic? Over 30, if I live on Oak Forest Drive over in the Franz area, to Kitty Hawk is 2 miles or 7 minutes. But all the way out to Cibolo Creek, I mean, part part of building the middle school out there was because the commute to Kitty Hawk was too far. So now it feels like we've just reversed the pattern. So all the Wortham parents that were having to drive to Kitty Hawk, well, now the people who are literally can see Kitty Hawk out their back window are now gonna have to drive to Cibolo Creek, which, you know, when you're in specialty volunteer programs like JSTEM or JECA or something like that, or CTE, and you gotta get on the bus at dark 30, that's on you because you signed up for the program. But when I move in on Quail Drive and I go to register and I'm told that my middle school, the one I see is not mine, I have to go way over there. Like, it feels like we spread that attendance zone like really, really wide and created the same problem we were trying to alleviate when we built that school up there in the first place. Except a different group will be happy and another group will be sad. They'll just be different people.
We haven't gotten that feedback. I would tell you that I believe you were the one who said that the shape of our district is wonky.
Correct.
And what we have right now is we're opening up the new middle school where we knew we could get some relief for, but to take full capacity of the new middle school, the student numbers need to be there. And currently, the way the district is designed, if we were to do this, we'd have lower numbers at that new middle school than if we sent some of these other communities to that campus as well. Now, when we talk about the process of transportation, all of these students will be going to Veterans, and Veterans is not far from Wortham Oaks, so it's not like they're not going to make this commute at some point. But we haven't gotten feedback that these communities don't want to go to the new middle school, and we were really trying to bring down the numbers for years. People who have been here in Judson ISD has seen Kitty Hawk go up to 1,400, nearing almost 1,500 students at times. So here's an opportunity for us to even that up a little bit and move those students up to the new middle school. It's just gonna look like, but the only way that we can do that is to move like a Ed Franz or an Olympia community as well, because the design of the community at 1604 and up just doesn't lend itself to being able to move more kids from somewhere else. The only place we can pull from, to Mr. Templeton's point that he made earlier, is Kitty Hawk.
Oh, yeah, and that's because the priority became filling Cibolo Creek and putting 6 schools all feeding that, but only leaving 2 feeding Kitty Hawk, which is what created the gap for the JSTEM in the first place. You know, if those schools had been split 4 and 4, this map would look completely different, and where JSTEM lands, you know, if JSTEM was not in the equation, you would have split it 4 and 4, right? And those kids wouldn't be traveling, specifically those 2 on the farthest end. You would not have recommended that they head all the way up to Cibolo Creek. They would have stayed there close. It feels like the JSTEM portion is what kind of is driving those kids to kind of balance out the numbers.
I'd push back a little bit, Ms. Ryan, and I need you guys to chime in, because the way I remember the numbers is, if you were to split 4 and 4, then what would happen is you'd have 500 students at Cibolo Creek Middle, but you still have almost 1,000 students, or 900 or 1,000 students at Kitty Hawk. So that's not the split we're looking for. The only way to do this is to move the Ed Franz and the Olympia communities to bring up those numbers. Otherwise, you're going to have 500-600 students because of the design of the district at the new middle school.
Do we know how many organic Kitty Hawk kids we're projecting just based on only having 2 elementary schools feeding there? Because I can't imagine it's huge numbers. It can't be more than like 400 if we only have 2 schools of 5th grade classes going there each year, plus accounting for attrition, because they're probably going to basis or SST.
Keep in mind, the Salinas campus is so much bigger than the Olympia.
Salinas and Crestview, is that the 2?
It's Salinas and Crestview right now.
Is it
Are the 2 campuses correct, Bob?
Yes. Without the JSTEM at Kitty Hawk, that Kitty Hawk number would be in that 500 student range.
Because we've moved those other 2 campuses. But if we were to move those campuses back to Kitty Hawk, then we'd have the same scenario at Cibolo Creek, with no other way to fill that capacity because it's so isolated from the rest of the district. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
What is our JSTEM number?
400.
400, and the 4,500 students, does that include JSTEM or not include middle school students?
4,500 includes JSTEM.
Okay, okay, thank you.
So then what's the seats? Are we going with 1,250 at each campus? Because now I'm looking at the middle school principals, I'm confident that they don't feel like they can house 1,250 students. I'm saying no shaking. And
If every classroom was a classroom that was designed as a classroom, had 24
they're
desks.
looking at me saying with every-
Technically could fit 1,250.
Yes, ma'am.
Technically.
I'm looking at the principal. She's saying every classroom available? No. And that's even at Kitty Hawk where we currently have 1,400 students.
Correct,
They
yeah.
have to push
There's
students
other
outside.
reasons and other master schedule things that places like, with bigger schools have to do in order to accomplish some of that stuff. But again, that's why you don't fill to 100%. That's why you don't fill over 90%. That's why your goal is 85%, is what the optimal number is. So if we had a course of action presented to this board that somehow got us to 85%, I feel like then we would meet the intent of our balanced scorecard, but I just don't see one of those in front of me. All I need to see are 2 courses of action that bring us to 59%.
Could I add one thing?
Please.
I appreciate the conversation about the balanced scorecard. From my lens, I'm focusing on priority 1 on the balanced scorecard. So I think when we talk about it being a balanced scorecard, we need to weigh all those pieces, right? Not just priority 5, which is using the buildings to their maximum capacity. And I absolutely hear you with the efficiency conversation. I just think we need to be really cautious about when we're talking about students as though they are numbers. And I get that because we're talking about efficiencies and we're talking about capacity and we're talking about all these things. But I just want to keep in mind, in order for us to continue to move the needle on instruction and keep that traction going, we have to be really careful about stacking these classrooms with 24, 28, 30 kids. I know you, I understand that. I'm speaking in supposition as well. I just want us to keep our eye on that, especially at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. As Mr. Brooks continues to say, that's a whole different kid. That requires a whole specialized set of skills from the adults that are leaning into those students, from the social emotional component to just teaching them how to be good humans, to the academic piece as well. So I think if we really want to do what's right for kids in Judson ISD, let's just be really cautious about when we're talking about that middle school group especially. Like, be cautious about the number of kids that we're putting in spaces while also weighing in the capacity and the efficiency and the component of that. The reason it's called a balanced scorecard is because we want to balance priority 1 and priority 5 all at the same time. It's difficult. I'm not saying this is easy for anyone in this space, right? I want us to keep those pieces in mind.
Yeah, and I would never recommend anything I didn't think was best academically for kids, hence the reason we talked at the last meeting where I pulled every peer-reviewed article I can find about campus sizes across the entire country, and there's no evidence. In fact, there's efficiencies in the larger campus size, in fact, because you can have more support services. You can up your honors class by 2 kids in order to lower your non-honors class by 2 kids and get more specialized instruction. And it's one of the things NEISD said in their meeting too, which is the larger the size you get, the more programming and experiences and things that you can provide to your students. And you have more support personnel. And yes, and I hope in an upcoming agenda, I don't know if I'll put it on for January, yeah, our class sizes vary in our core subjects from there are kids 11 to a classroom and there are kids at 36, and I'm pretty sure there's kids sitting on floors in some of our middle schools right now. And that's not okay, because our kids deserve to have equitable class sizes across our district. And so fixing class size is one problem and what class sizes should look like, but that's a completely independent problem from a campus size. And the more administrators and paras and RTI and support personnel you have on a campus, that's what the research says will provide you equitable academic outcomes. Smaller campus size does not improve academic outcomes. And I can send you some journal articles if you need them.
So I'd kind of like to chime in for a moment here. I taught at Kitty Hawk. There was a whole bunch of kids there. One of the biggest issues we hear about from parents is bullying that happens at middle school. The more you crowd them in during passing periods, the more crowded they are in the cafeteria, the more crowded they are in the gyms, the more crowded they are in the common areas, the more opportunities for the bullying and the hits to their emotional needs. That's a big factor for me when I think about staffing middle schools with higher numbers of kids. We've got kids now that are completely different from the kids I taught at Kitty Hawk. What they've gone through, what life has been like for them, the struggles that they have. And, you know, I was at Kitty Hawk, I want to say what, 18 years ago? We don't have those same students anymore. Our district has changed. We have to look out for every kid, and I agree with Dr. Saunders, we can't just talk about numbers without talking about the specifics of the students. Middle school is such a difficult age to start with. We have to make sure that we're providing opportunities for those kids, not just academically, but socially, emotionally, all that stuff is crucial too.
And if I may, Dr. Fields.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the other things we have to continue to keep in mind, and I agree with everyone spoken so far, but one of the things we have to continue to keep in mind is that when you're talking about all kids and meeting the kids of all kids, we have a large special ed population. Yeah. Part of that is we have to provide classrooms for specialized settings. And sometimes that does mean 3 kids with 1 teacher and an aide because of the needs of that child. So even though the classroom is there and it could house 24, 25 kids, we have to use that particular classroom for a behavior center, or to use that classroom for an Apple unit for our autism kids. And so we have to keep that in mind when we're talking about square footage and we're talking about how many classrooms we have in place. When we're talking about meeting the needs of our children, we're talking about all kids. And that includes our special populations that require more than just being in a classroom with 20 other kids. It sometimes means a classroom of 10. It sometimes means a classroom of 6.
Well said.
And we have to keep that. And the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to harp on this we have never been in the position that we're in right now with special education and the lack of special education teachers and the lack of bilingual teachers. We can keep talking about compressing kids into one campus and trying to fill classrooms with that, but until we find a way to meet the needs of the teachers that we need to be certified in those areas, we're going to continue to have this challenge that all districts are facing right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So I also want to just echo again that there was a comment made that there's no data that proves that smaller campuses support academic success. I would say that I don't believe that. And I'll tell you why. Because I've had meetings with Ms. Stanford, and we've met with parents and teachers, and student discipline still rises to the top as a big concern in the classroom. In middle schools, having more students on campus, as Ms. Canoyer said, the bullying is real. So we need to give our staff the best opportunity. I say that because Dr. Fields, I'm going to, of course, expect your team is going to produce academic outcomes that we would like to see in middle school, and with being innovative to address student discipline and academics and all that. So it's not a free pass, hey, you got a small campus. Now, what are you going to do with it? And that's really the exciting part, because we have opportunities to partner with nonprofits. We have opportunities to do more programming on the campus. We still don't have a robust after-school program for middle school students to meet their social emotional needs. So capacity allows us to bring those programs in, and those are things that I'll be putting on future agendas to talk about what we're doing to be innovative in those areas.
I would just remind us that we haven't gotten to the point where we've decreased the numbers yet. We're still at almost 1,300 at Kitty Hawk. We're still at almost 1,200 at Metzger. We're still at. So we welcome the day where we can have more manageable sizes at campuses. So, that is our recommendations. Once again, unless there's some more questions or feedback, that what we would add, yes, ma'am.
Are we talking about high school or middle school?
Well, we finished middle school, and the high schools are just the middle schools that feed in. So if
Yeah.
there were any more questions, though, we stand ready to answer them.
I just wanted to clarify that really there wasn't much to choose from because the middle school plan just determines the high school plan.
Correct.
Like there is no
That is
other,
correct.
okay. Yeah, because there was a lot of discussion of UIL brackets and all that kind of stuff. And I just want to make sure that nothing we are recommending has anything to do with football
Never
brackets.
was. No. Never was.
It was on there in the growth and planning, it was discussed that we have to keep the Rockets as a 6A and keep all that, school sizes
We
are
said
what
that
school
that could
sizes
possibly
are.
be a possibility, but what we did also say is that Judson used to be, for, once again, those who were here, they used to have 5,000 students there. Then when they made it just the one campus that it's on now, it was still almost 5,000 students. I think it was 4,600 or almost 5 with the building that they're in. We're showing that with the 10-year projection that Mr. Templeton has given us, Judson's numbers would, if left unaddressed, would go down to 1,900, and Wagner's numbers can go up to 2,800. And Wagner's not built for 2,800 kids. We know Judson is. So why would we not now start making moves like doing the move of Park Village feeding into Judson, which will increase the Judson numbers and simultaneously decrease the Wagner numbers, which would keep them in the same UIL category that they're at now. But if left unchecked, all of this changes. But this is not about athletics.
Okay, 'cause,
This
yeah.
is about the capacity of the buildings that the students can move into.
Yeah, because our extracurriculars are not about, a
This
state
has never been
championship
about
cup
that.
and a ring is cool every once in a while, but that is not what the, 10,000 kids that participate in some sort of extracurricular or UIL from elementary up to high school has nothing, to do with it. If we're all competing in 5A together, then we're all competing in 5A together. Welcome to every other school district. That's why we play all 3 Comel high schools, and they're all competing at
This
each
is
other. It
about
is what it
capacity
is.
numbers.
My only concern with the high school one is the projections for Veterans Memorial, because those numbers, based on however we have the feeders, which don't make a lot of sense to me, your numbers, but I'll just go with them. Because it feels like we're gonna, out of Cibolo Creek and Kitty Hawk, we would have more kids, but maybe it's the JSTEM portion. But getting Veterans Memorial down to the, 1,400 mark, first of all, UIL brackets are probably gonna change at some point, and 1,400 may become 4A, the way things are trending with some mega high schools, in other parts of Texas. But, the smaller you get, the lower your academic offerings. And again, it's back to goal 1 and go, on the balanced scorecard and CCMR and dual credit and AP and CTE pass. So as we draw veterans down more and more and more, we saw how, we got to a point where we're increasing our academic offerings because the the enrollment was going up, but now we're projecting that enrollment's going to go back down. So it's going to take some creativity to make sure that academic offerings are still going to be available at veterans even when those numbers go down, because that's also where we're hemorrhaging even kids at the high school level to collegiate prep schools and STEM high schools now, just to get those offerings if we're not going to add, a more robust STEM program up in the northern feeder pattern. So
I believe we have a STEM program in the northern feeder pattern. It's currently at Judson Middle. We're talking about moving it to Kitty Hawk. If we're talking about at Veterans proper,
yeah, all we have is
they have
cybersecurity
programs.
is the.
They got cybersecurity.
Yeah,
yes,
and
ma'am.
digital media.
And they've got cosmetology. They have a robust CTE program as well.
Correct, yeah, no, the demand from parents up in that area are engineering-based type mathematics and higher level mathematics things, but we haven't addressed that need
We
yet.
can
so-
implement that. All we
Fine.
need is for the course selections to be made in the course selections catalog, and then we can go out and get the teachers to support that.
The engineering classes aren't on the course selection sheet at that.
All we have to do is just get students to come back and say that they're interested in the program, whether
Yeah.
it's on the course catalog or, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but if we have the interest of students at a campus, we're going to provide that instruction for them, correct?
Yes, we, in fact, in the board meeting that's coming up next week, is an innovative classes from the CTE program that we bring when we have a student interest into a pathway. We try to provide that with that. But I also want to remind that in addition to what we call advanced courses, like your AP courses, that syllabus has to be selected and approved by College Board. In addition, the dual credit classes, anyone that's teaching those classes have to have at least 18 hours at post-grad level in order to be hired by any of our partnership schools that we have here in San Antonio to teach those courses. But again, the CTE, we sit down every year with Dr. Steele and her team and talk about what are the things, what are the interests, what is going on in the market to determine on what type of pathways we're going to continue to offer, which ones we have to move. But I also will say that in the last 2 years, the state has come back and deleted a lot of the courses that we had, so that also changed the face of our CTE program here in Judson ISD and across the state of Texas. But again, it's student interest, it's student capability of taking those advanced courses and keeping those numbers. I know that we work very closely with all of our high school principals when we're talking about building master schedule for the following year. In fact, we're in the middle of that process right now, which is why we really need that vote.
Yeah, and I'll let you know, as a parent and who's put a number of kids through Veterans Memorial High School, there is no conduit for kids to tell them what classes they want that aren't on the course schedule. There's no fill in the class you would want. And I brought this up at the Panorama survey too. Our parents and students have clearly said we're not offering programs that interest them and we're not offering courses. But we've never gone out and surveyed them and asked them what's missing. So if you're waiting for my Caitlin to go wander into Miss Rendon's office and ask her to try to get engineering on the schedule, that's probably not going to happen. As opposed to if a survey went out and asked them what kinds of classes. And if you haven't seen Mr. Templeton's great slides he did on where we have lost students to, because he went and tracked the transfers, and again, it's over 800 students last year to School of Science and Technology and Basis Texas, which are the two right there on 35, Northern Feeder and Pattern, right there. The parents, over 800 students last year, left Judson and went to those two STEM-only schools. So I'm pretty sure we don't even have to survey people. Just go look at what those schools are offering, and we can pretty much figure out where our customers are.
I don't have any calculation of those numbers, but we
Yep,
can work with Mr.
Templeton's slides,
Templeton.
he
Got
had
it. All
briefed
right.
those at Growth and Planning. So, yeah, he's got that data,
Gotcha, thanks.
so.
That's it, Dr. Fields.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Ms. Canor, that is our presentation. There's no other
Are
questions?
there any other questions or comments?
I just had one quote that I'm going to steal from Dr. Micah that I think is really important for our community is, no matter what happens, there's going to be a lot of changes for a lot of people, staff, family, parents, bus drivers. Everybody's going to be going somewhere different, and it's not going to be the perfect scenario for everybody. Everyone's going to have to adjust in some way, shape, or form. And he compared it to like pruning in your garden, and that when you first do it, doesn't look quite pretty, but when it starts to experience new growth and you see how it flourishes in the new environment. So if whatever changes we make, we keep an eye on what that can become for our students and our families, and how we can expand things and do better. If we can get through the bumps of the change and the transition, I think our rose bush will flourish on the other side. So it'll be interesting to see how this all falls out. But I appreciate all the community that has come in and reached out to us as board members, reached out on social media, come in and spoke, and the students and everything, because you know these neighborhoods way better than we know them. These are your homes, this is where you live, and these are your schools. So we can't do any of this without your input.
I'd like to also thank Dr. Templeton, Mr. Templeton, for all the hard work he's done.
Thank you, Bob.
Working with us. I really appreciate the fact that we're working with you. With no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 8:05.